Chapter 25. Renbachien returned to the Beast Park. Her Majesty summoned him to the palace the next morning. This time, it wasn't the guard Shirhu. It was someone he didn't know. He asked where Renbachien was and Her Majesty summoned him. Renbachien was playing with Gun-Gun. Gun-Gun kept trying to break free from his arms. After seeing the person, Renbachien immediately went forward and said, "I'm Renbachien. May I know why Her Majesty summoned me?" "Just go. Why are you talking so much nonsense?" the guard said in a low and muffled voice. He entered the palace. It was the same palace as last time. Renbachien didn't know what the palace was for, but the Empress seemed to like it very much. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Renbachien was brought in and saw the Empress in red with her hair scattered behind her. She was leaning on the couch. The palace was very cool. After all, there were 2 basins of ice. "Come forward and talk. As for you, step down," the Empress said in a lazy voice. Renbachien took a few steps forward, lowered his head slightly, and waited for the Empress to speak. "Previously, you said that you can produce 5,000 caddies of grain per mu? Is this true or false?" the Empress asked. Renbachien's heart skipped a beat. The last time he said this, the Empress didn't react at all. Later on, he asked Caretaker Shir and found out that Dayo was actually very short of grain. He had been guessing what was going on all this time. Now that the Empress finally asked, he immediately told her in full detail. This thing is called a sweet potato, also known as a sweet potato. It can produce about 5,000 caddies per mu, depending on the condition of the field. However, it will definitely produce 5 to 6,000 caddies per mu. Furthermore, this thing has an advantage. It has very low requirements on the field. It can be grown on plains and mountains. Dayo doesn't have many plains. Planting this thing should solve most of the food shortage. The Empress sat up straight when she heard this. "Is what you said true?" the Empress asked in a deep voice. "Absolutely true, without any falsehood." Renbachien lowered his head and answered. "Where can I find this sweet potato?" "Your Majesty, give me an acre of land near the Beast Park. I can cultivate and plant it. I can see the results in 4 months." Renbachien didn't dare to say that he didn't have any sweet potatoes on hand. He could only get them in 2 days. It would be too easy for him to make a mistake. Hence, he used ambiguous words. "I agree to this. I will wait for a few months to see if I can really produce 5 to 6,000 to 10,000 caddies per mu. If you succeed, you will be rewarded with a great merit. You can ask me for anything you want. If it doesn't work out, you should know the consequences of lying to me," the Empress said slowly. "Don't worry, Your Majesty. I definitely won't risk my head," Renbachien said. The Empress nodded and said, "That would be for the best." Having said that, he lay back down on the bed and said, "You said you can tell stories? Take a few steps forward and tell us." Renbachien took a few steps forward and got a clearer look at the Empress. Her pair of phoenix eyes were slightly squinted, and the expression on her face was very calm. Her face, which was originally full of heroic spirit, looked a little softer at this moment. The red clothes outlined her body, showing off her curves perfectly. Renbachien glanced at her, lowered his head, and started to think hard about what story to tell. Journey to the West? This was his favorite, but it seemed like he couldn't say it. The Empress wouldn't like a monkey that wreaked havoc in heaven, would she? Water margin? A group of rebellious bandits was even more out of the question. He had never read Dream of the Red Chamber. It seemed like he could only tell about the 3 kingdoms. This was the only one that left a deep impression on him. He had also watched the TV series a few times. Even though he couldn't remember the original text, he could still tell it in the vernacular. Other than the 4 great classical novels, he could only tell about The Legend of the White Snake and Liang Shanhua and Zhu Yingtai. He couldn't remember the rest. After deciding to tell the Empress about the romance of the 3 kingdoms, Renbachien cleared his throat and said, "Your Majesty, then I will tell you a story that happened during the Han Dynasty in ancient China. The surging Yangtze River flows east. The waves wash away all heroes. Whether it's success or failure, it's all gone. The Green Mountains are still there, and the sunset glow a few times. The white-haired fisherman and woodcutter are used to watching the autumn moon and the spring breeze. A pot of muddy wine is a happy reunion. How many things have happened since ancient times? They are all a joke. After reciting a poem called Linjiang Xian, the empress said, "Even though it sounds good, it's a little lethargic." Rinpoche laughed dryly, then continued to tell the first chapter. The three heroes of the Peach Garden swore brotherhood and beheaded the yellow-turbaned hero. From time to time, the empress asked Rinpoche about the names of some people, such as the 10 imperial attendants, Zheng Xian, Lu Ji, Gong Sunzan, and so on. When Rinpoche was explaining, the empress heard the word eunuch and commented, "I heard that there are eunuchs in the Great Xia Imperial Palace. However, to trample on his own people like this, he is unworthy of being the ruler of a nation." When talking about Empress Dowager He and Empress Dowager Dong, the empress was rather puzzled and asked, "Why can't women participate in politics?" In ancient China, women weren't allowed to participate in politics. If anyone has any objections, just behead them until no one speaks, the empress said disdainfully. Rinpoche thought about it and felt that what she said made sense. Moreover, there was really someone who did this and succeeded. It seemed that this person definitely had a common language with Wu Zetian. After the empress finished her lunch, Rinpoche drank some water and continued to tell the story. At first, the empress would occasionally interrupt, but gradually, she stopped talking and focused on listening to Rinpoche's story. In one day, Rinpoche told the story 11 times, all the way until Liu Bei saved Kong Rong and Liu Bu defeated Cao Cao. At the end of the day, he talked until his mouth was dry, but his spirits were very high. In the past, he had always liked the three kingdoms, but he rarely discussed it with others. Now that he met someone who had never heard of this story, he finally had the leeway to express it. The more he talked, the more excited he became. His spirits were getting higher and higher, and he was getting more and more engrossed. Towards the end, he even began to pace back and forth, occasionally gesturing with his hands. The empress didn't mind. Watching his gesticulating performance was rather interesting, and the corner of her mouth curled up slightly. Unfortunately, Rinpoche was immersed in the world of romance of the three kingdoms and didn't notice. The two palace maids at the side didn't have the empress's various thoughts and comments. They were extremely engrossed in the story. As the story progressed, they would gnash their teeth and smile happily. When the sky turned dark, Rinpoche noticed the color of the sky outside and stopped talking. The empress said that it was rather interesting and asked Rinpoche to go back and continue the rest of the story tomorrow. When Rinpoche heard this, he was going back to reality tonight. Where would he find the time to explain to the empress? He hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, I have to prepare for planting tomorrow and clear a piece of land. After all, food is the foundation of a nation. Having sufficient food and not relying on those merchants is the top priority." The empress looked at him with interest and said, "What you said makes sense. The people's livelihood is an important matter. Let's leave it at that. Go back and prepare that sweet potato first. Come back and tell me the rest of the story after you are done. Don't forget that you still have an appointment with my imperial kitchen." The two palace maids looked at Rinpoche with some regret. They were just about to get to the part that made them anxious. Chapter 26. When he woke up, Rinpoche had already returned to his newly rented bedroom. He walked around upstairs and downstairs. He was the only one there, and it felt a little lonely. It couldn't be compared to the liveliness on the other side. Although he wasn't short of money for the time being and living on this side was more comfortable, he had a greater sense of existence on the other side. This was because he was unique there. On Earth, he was just one of the masses and didn't stand out in any way. As he lamented, he charged his phone. He switched on the computer. The 34-inch monitor was much better than his original 21-inch monitor. After watching a movie, he switched on his phone and saw that there were 2 missed calls. His former colleagues had all become passers-by. Both of these missed calls were from Ching. After thinking about it, Rinpoche wasn't in a hurry to return the call. It was such a coincidence that it happened to be 10 days each time. After going downstairs for breakfast, Rinpoche came back and switched on his computer to check on the planting of sweet potatoes. After reading it once, he had a rough idea of what to do. He drove to the supermarket to buy more than 10 kilograms of sweet potatoes, beer, snacks, and the like before returning home. Just as he opened the door, Rinpoche heard voices in the house. Thief! This thought flashed through Rinpoche's mind. He immediately remembered that it should be the housekeeper. The person inside also heard the sound of the door opening. The voice stopped abruptly. Then, a girl in her 20s wearing an apron peeked in and quickly retracted her head. Someone's here. Auntie, is this the owner of the house? Rinpoche vaguely heard this voice. Following that, a middle-aged woman came out. When she saw Rinpoche, she smiled and said, Mr. Ren, you are back. Rinpoche had seen her at the housekeeping company before, but only once. Yes, I am back. You guys continue with your work, don't worry about me. Rinpoche smiled. He wasn't used to being addressed as Mr. just now, but it felt pretty good. He placed the things beside the sofa in the living room, lay on the sofa, and switched on the television. It was a new period drama, but Rinpoche's mind wasn't on the screen. In one moment he was thinking about the black mud cream. In the next moment he was thinking about the other world. In the next moment he was thinking about the romance of the three kingdoms. Suddenly he thought about the fan and the shop. He hurriedly went out and drove around. First, he looked for a private jewelry shop. Do you have money? Yes, what do you want? A necklace or a ring? Just buy some silver and melt it into small pieces. After Rinpoche finished speaking, that person was obviously not interested anymore. But he still asked, how much? Rinpoche did some calculations. Silver wasn't expensive on Earth, but its purchasing power was still acceptable in that world. Originally, 80 taels was enough for 4,000 grams, but it was not a bad idea to buy more. 50 kilograms of silver, Rinpoche was. 50 jin was 500 taels, 25,000 grams was only 100,000 yuan. Rinpoche said. From Ren. At this time, after deducting the money for renting a house, buying a car and transferring money to his mother, he still had 700,000 to 800,000 yuan in his bank card. He didn't care about this money much. When the boss heard 50 caddies, he immediately became more enthusiastic. 50 caddies of silver was equivalent to 25 kilograms. Even if he earned a little less, it was still a sum of money. Although he able. He money. Bachien. Being. Ren. Bachien. Was. Being a. Rinpoche paid the deposit and got the receipt. He agreed to melt the silver into small pieces and collect it 2 days later. Then he bought a yo-yo and a hand-cranked fan to study. He wanted to see how he could make a reliable fan under such simple conditions. When he returned, the two housekeepers had already left. The house was clean and tidy. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. He took out the yo-yo and the hand-cranked fan and disassembled them to see how to make a fan. After studying for a few hours, he had a rough idea. He just had to find someone to make it and see if it was as he expected. The next day, Rinpoche sat in front of the computer and read The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. He recalled some of the blurry scenes. On the third day, he called Chen. Did you go into seclusion again? Chen asked the moment he picked up the call. It's about the formula for the black mud cream. That person lives in a remote place in the mountains. I called you back as soon as I got back. Rinpoche apologized. However, he knew in his heart that he wouldn't be able to contact Chen so frequently in the future. This was because his days in that world were too stable. Every time, he would stay in this world for 3 days and then disappear for 9 days. How is it? Did you get the formula? Chen asked. Not yet, but soon. Let's go out to have some fun tonight. Let's have dinner. I won't be going to the bar. Rinpoche shook his head. After arranging a time with Chen, he searched for herbs on the internet for a few hours and prepared to exchange them for the black mud cream. Since ordinary people had never seen snow in that world, Rinpoche guessed that it was subtropical. Rinpoche then searched for a few herbs that appeared frequently and were difficult to cure. He memorized them. Then he went to buy a bunch of spices. Sichuan pepper, Chinese anise, sesame, cumin, cinnamon, monosodium glutamate, and 13 spices. He bought a big bag of them. He also specially bought the seeds of Sichuan pepper, Chinese anise, fennel, and cinnamon to plant them in that world. As for the sesame and cumin, they were the seeds. Although Chinese anise was the same, the ones sold in the market had been treated and could no longer germinate and grow. With these ingredients, Renbaqian should be able to make delicious food with a similar taste in that world. After loading the ingredients into the car, he went to collect the silver. 50 kilograms was a lot, and all of it was melted into 2 or 3 taels of silver. Renbaqian did not have time to check the purity of the silver. He paid immediately and carried the silver into the car. Renbaqian then headed to the restaurant where he had arranged to meet Qingqing. After waiting in the car for a long time and playing with his phone for a while, someone knocked on the car window. He turned around and saw Qingqing waving his hand at him. Renbaqian got out of the car and was about to speak when he was stunned. There was a woman beside Qingqing. This was very normal. Qingqing often had different women around him, and he had also invited Renbaqian to dinner. So far, other than Jiang Nan, Renbaqian had not seen any other woman appear for a second time. However, this woman surprised Renbaqian. It was actually his university classmate, Dong Haiqing. When Dong Haiqing saw Renbaqian, her mouth was agape and her expression was obviously very surprised. "You two know each other?" Qingqing noticed their expressions and asked with a smile. "Yes, we are classmates," Renbaqian replied with a smile. During the heavy snowfall, Dong Haiqing had always been the target of many guys and attracted a lot of attention. On the other hand, Renbaqian was a passerby that no one paid attention to. During their 4 years in university, the number of words they had exchanged did not exceed one hand. They had never interacted before. Renbaqian was just surprised that it was such a coincidence. On the other hand, Dong Haiqing was even more surprised than him. The reason why she could remember Renbaqian was because when they were in school, there was a girl who seemed to have a crush on Renbaqian. After she found out about it, she said, "He doesn't have money, he doesn't have good looks, and he doesn't have a personality. Why did you find someone like him?" After that, there was naturally no more after that. Even though Renbaqian did not know about this, she still remembered it. Because of that incident, she had paid attention to Renbaqian for a period of time. The impression that he left on her was only one word: ordinary, even more ordinary than ordinary. It was a waste for the girl who shared the same bed to be matched with such a person. Therefore, when she saw that Qingqing's friend was actually Renbaqian, she was naturally very surprised. Renbaqian looked the same as when he was in school. There was not much change. His appearance was considered delicate and pretty, and he only had short stubble on his head. He was dressed very ordinarily and his total value might not even exceed 300 yuan. However, he was driving an Audi A6L, which was worth at least 500,000 to 600,000 yuan. Furthermore, he was actually good friends with Qingqing. She did not know much about Qingqing. She only knew that he was a rich second generation and his family was extremely wealthy. However, Renbaqian was good friends with him. Furthermore, he was driving such a car. Presumably, he was not simple, right? Right now, there was only one thought in Dong Haiqing's mind. She had misjudged him in the past. Chapter 27. Why are you in Shin City? Renbaqian asked curiously. "I'm working here now," Dong Haiqing said with a smile. "I didn't know you were here." "All right, let's continue our small talk later. Let's go in first." Qingqing placed one hand on Dong Haiqing's waist and the other on Renbaqian's back. After the few of them entered the room and ordered, Dong Haiqing asked, "Where are you working now?" "Squatting at home." Renbaqian answered casually. Dong Haiqing smiled. "I'm so envious of your freedom. If he could stay at home, drive a good car, and go in and out of a high-end hotel without a change in expression, then his family must be rich." It was just as he had guessed. There are still a few university classmates in Shunqing. Do you want to join us for a gathering? It depends on the situation. I often go to other places. Rinpoche replied. Moreover, he wasn't interested in the reunion at all. He had no contact with any of his former classmates. I'll contact you when the time comes. You can go if you have time. Dong Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. His attitude was friendly, completely different from when he was in school. If he was treated like this by Dong Haiqing in school, he might be happy for a while and even fantasize about it. But after being in society for a year, he clearly knew what the reason was. Do you remember Qinbing? Dong Haiqing asked again. Rinpoche thought about it and had some impression of her. She was a petite and exquisite young lady. She was pretty, but her legs were a little short. Sitting on the chair, he looked like he was 1.65 meters tall, but in reality he was only 1.58 meters tall. He nodded. She had a good impression of you back then. Dong Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. Rinpoche was slightly surprised. This was the first time he had heard of this. But after that, you didn't do anything, and she wasn't a proactive person, so it was left unsettled. She is also in Shin City now. Dong Haiqing said. However, the truth was that Qinbing had once thought of taking the initiative. But after hearing what she said, she finally gave up. If he could bring Qinbing and Rinpoche together, it would be beneficial to him. After all, she didn't have much confidence in dealing with this rich second-generation heir. But his height, appearance, and background were all in line with her expectations. Since she wasn't confident, she might as well take the side route through Rinpoche. It might be beneficial. Even if there weren't any benefits, Rinpoche and Qinbing would still remember his kindness, right? Rinpoche could also be of help to her. If Rinpoche knew what Dong Haiqing was thinking, he would definitely be shocked. To think that they even had ideas about him. Moreover, it had only been a year since he entered society, and he had turned a dazzling figure in the eyes of many people in the ivory tower into such a state. After exchanging phone numbers with Rinpoche, Dong Haiqing shifted her attention back to Qinqing. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. He did not have much of an impression of Qinbing. If she really wanted to matchmake the two of them, Rinpoche would have a headache. After all, he wasn't good at rejecting people. After that, Rinpoche spent most of his time listening to Qinqing and Dong Haiqing's conversation. Occasionally, he would interrupt them. With Dong Haiqing around, it was inconvenient for the two of them to talk about many things, so they just had a simple chat. After leaving the restaurant, Rinpoche rejected Qinqing's suggestion to go to the bar for a drink. He watched as the two of them got into Qinqing's car and drove home. He placed the silver, spices, and sweet potatoes in a bag and placed them on the bed. Rinpoche had only been online for a while before he hugged the bag and lay down. He was afraid that he would move his arms when he fell asleep and leave something behind. These were things that he would need when he returned. He needed the silver to rent the shop, the spices were related to the bet with the imperial kitchen, and the sweet potatoes were even more important. When he returned, he would find someone to cut them into small pieces and plant them on a plot of land. After lying down for a long time, Rinpoche could no longer open his eyes. In a daze, he felt the scene before him change. He was already in the room in the Beast Park. Squeaking sounds could be heard from outside the door. It was a pitiful sound. Rinpoche changed his clothes and opened the door. The two pandas immediately hugged his legs and refused to let go. Furthermore, they were squeaking nonstop. What's wrong? Rinpoche was at a loss at first. When he saw that the bamboo leaves in the basket were long gone and the floor was covered with feces, he immediately guessed that the two of them were hungry and thirsty. He had been gone for a day, and no one cared about these two little ones. The bamboo leaves had long been eaten, and no one fed them water. No wonder they were so pitiful. When he thought of this, Rinpoche hurriedly went to a nearby place to fetch a bucket of water. Before he poured it into the basin, the two pandas leaned on the bucket and started to drink. The weather here was so hot, and no one took care of them for a day. It seemed like the two little ones were thirsty. Rinpoche poured a basin of water and ran to the warehouse where the animal food was stored in the Beast Park. He took a big basket of bamboo leaves and came back. Seeing that the two little ones did not care about him and dived into the basket, Rinpoche stroked their heads. Fortunately, he had only been gone for a day. If he was gone for 3 days, it would be troublesome. It seemed like he had to find someone to take care of these two little ones. After a sleepless night, Rinpoche saw that the sky was still dark and estimated that it was around 2 in the morning. He returned to his room and stuffed everything under his bed. Then he lay on his bed and slept again. Early in the morning he was woken up by Caretaker Shur. Caretaker Shur's loud voice reverberated in Rinpoche's ears. "Where did you go yesterday? I have been looking for you for the whole day." "What's the matter?" Rinpoche struggled to open his eyes. He had a sleepy look on his face. "Her Majesty instructed me to clear a piece of land for you in the Beast Park. Also, I have gathered 70 taels of silver for rent. We have to go in a while. Otherwise, the 20 taels of silver will go down the drain." Caretaker Shur immediately lifted Rinpoche up from the bed. Rinpoche was 1.75 meters tall, but in Caretaker Shur's hands he looked like a child. This time, Rinpoche immediately woke up. He helplessly said, "Wait for me, I will be done in a while." When Rinpoche was putting on his clothes, Caretaker Shur was still curious. "Why you still wearing a loincloth on this day?" Rinpoche thought for a while before realizing that Caretaker Shur was talking about his underwear. He quickly pulled up his pants and looked at Caretaker Shur speechlessly. "You don't wear a loincloth? It's too hot. It's better to wear something cool," Caretaker Shur replied naturally. Rinpoche cupped his hands. He had nothing in common with Caretaker Shur. When he went out it was already getting late. It was at least 7 or 8 in the morning. People in this world slept early and woke up early. They slept at 7 or 8 in the evening and woke up at 5 or 6 in the morning. He went to the kitchen to look for something to eat. When the cook saw Rinpoche, a smile appeared on his face. "Caretaker Rin, when are you going to teach me?" "In another 2 days." Rinpoche waved his hand. He did not have time for these 2 days. He took some dry rations made from an unknown variety of coarse grains and a bowl of vegetable soup. After finishing it, he returned to his room to take some money and followed Caretaker Shur to the rental shop. "I have bet all my assets and even borrowed some money," Caretaker Shur said painfully on the way. "Actually, I can pay for this shop myself," Rinpoche said. "Forget it. I have already taken advantage of you. I can't let you take on such a huge risk. Anyway, I can just throw in all the money earned from the other 2 shops. I reckon it won't make a loss." Rinpoche smiled. Caretaker Shur was indeed a good person. However, he was also a good person. That shop would definitely not make a loss in the future. Just as the 2 of them arrived, they heard someone say, "Little brother, you are here." He turned his head and saw the mustached middle-aged man from the other day. Rinpoche cupped his hands. "I have already given you the money. Naturally, I have to come." The middle-aged man smiled bitterly. "It seems that you have made up your mind. I shall take my leave now." Chapter 28. The 2 of them didn't have to wait long before the burly man arrived at the door. He nodded at the 2 of them and turned to open the door. Rinpoche passed the cloth bag he was carrying to that person. Inside the bag was the 130 taels of silver that he and Caretaker Shur had pooled together. It was indeed a little tiring to carry something that weighed more than 10 kilograms for almost an hour. After checking, the man nodded at the 2 of them and finally revealed a smile. Caretaker Shur took out the strips of paper and red clay that he had prepared beforehand. The man took a look at them and pressed his fingerprint on them. From now on, this shop would belong to Rinpoche and Caretaker Shur for a year. "How should I address you? Where can I find you if there's anything?" Rinpoche asked with a smile after seeing him press his fingerprint. "Jindong General's residence." "I have something to discuss with Caretaker Shi," the man said to Rinpoche and tossed the key over. After he left, Caretaker Shur said, "So it's the property of General Jindong." Rinpoche had no idea about the court officials of Dayo. However, there was one thing he remembered. Those who could become generals were all capable of fighting. To be able to sit in the position of General of the East, one had to be able to fight. "What rank is the East vanquishing general?" Rinpoche asked curiously. Dayo's official ranks were modeled after Great Xia's, which was a 9-rank system. Primary grade 2. Caretaker sure gestured with his fingers. Brother sure, what level are you at? 9th class, minor class. Then, as a steward, I can't even be considered as a minor 9th rank steward. Dayo is the same as Great Xia. There are 9 ranks in the system, and there are 18 ranks in total. Yours is called unattainable, Caretaker sure explained. Rinpochen smacked his lips. In the past, he had never even been a class monitor. Now, at least he had 10 subordinates. Moreover, he had so many good things in his hands. No matter what, he would be able to get an official position. Dayo respected martial arts. If he brought the ancient military books over, would he be able to fool a few people? What do you think? What should we do next? Caretaker sure asked. Recruit people. Set up this place first. Brother sure, don't you hate the people of the Yun Nation? In the future, the people of Dayo and the people of the Yun Nation will have one price. Heh, let's do as you say. Caretaker sure was elated when he heard this. Everything else is easy, and it's easy to make. You can add more flavors, and you can make any kind of fruit. Try not to leak the information about making ice with saltpeter, Rinpochen warned. The matter of saltpeter could not be concealed, but the longer it could be concealed, the longer it could be used. Once the streets were filled with them, they wouldn't be able to make money anymore. Understood. This matter is definitely not bad. Caretaker sure patted his chest and said, after the two of them walked around the room, Rinpochen gave them some ideas. They would set up a bar counter in the corner, a row of benches at the side, and tables and chairs in the other empty spaces. This way, people who came to buy shaved ice could sit here and eat, or they could sit down and rest for a while, waiting to take it away. There was nothing else. Brother sure, we can also sell ice. A piece of shaved ice costs 5 copper coins, and a piece of ice the size of the one we use for storage can be sold for 30 copper coins. All right. The people of Yun Nation will double. After the two of them settled the matter, they left the shop and went straight to the Chin medicine shop that they saw last time. The shop wasn't considered big, but there were quite a lot of people. At the entrance, they saw a few aborigines going in and out. Some of them were injured and some seemed to be sick. There was a middle-aged man sitting in the shop, and there were 3 to 4 helpers. Are you the boss? Rinpochen stood at the side and asked after the man finished prescribing medicine. What's the matter? The man raised his head and took a glance at Rinpochen. He then ignored him and shouted, Next. I have a business transaction to discuss with you. I only treat patients here, I don't do any other business. It's a business related to treating patients. Rinpochen wasn't anxious at all. After the middle-aged man saw another 2 patients and saw that there was no one waiting behind him, he raised his head and said to Rinpochen, What's the matter? Speak. I want to use my medicine prescription to exchange for your prescription. My prescription can save a large number of patients suffering from tetanus, which is also known as chichi. After hearing Rinpochen's words, the middle-aged man's face became a lot more solemn. He said to the 2 of them, Come in with me, let's talk inside. There were 2 chairs and a table in the inner room. The middle-aged man first gestured to the 2 of them, then he sat on a chair. How do I address you? The middle-aged man asked casually. My surname is Ren. Rinpochen, the person beside me is my companion. May I know how to address you? Rinpochen asked. Up until now, he still didn't know Caretaker Shi's name and called him Brother Shi every day. My surname is Chin Zixing. Now tell me, what kind of prescription do you want to exchange for? Chin Zixing asked. The black mud cream. After Rinpochen finished speaking, he stared at Chin Zixing attentively. As long as the other party was willing to exchange, Rinpochen would definitely give him something that would satisfy him. He was just afraid that the other party wouldn't be willing to exchange. That would be troublesome. Chen Zixing muttered to himself for a while and said, The black mud cream is passed down from generation to generation in my Chen family. Although the production isn't high, its effects are amazing. However, medicine is used to treat people. It's not impossible to exchange with you, but the thing you are offering must have a corresponding value. Furthermore, it can't be the kind that is circulated everywhere. After hearing Qin Zixing's words, Rinpoche was instantly elated. As long as you are willing to exchange, anything is fine. There were so many kinds of medicine in the modern world, including Chinese and Western medicine. There were also various medical treatments that exceeded Qin Zixing's imagination. There must be something that he was willing to exchange. In any case, Rinpoche didn't feel any heartache for selling his father's farm. Tell me what I can offer. Penicillin can be used as an antibiotic to treat many diseases, including Chirin. When people fall sick, it is caused by bacterial invasion and inflammation. The main symptoms are redness, swelling, heat, pain, and dysfunction. The most obvious symptom is inflammation of the wound. Secondly, tonsillitis, sore throat, coughing, pneumonia, and bronchitis are all effective. The most important thing is to treat the wound, as well as women giving birth. It can greatly reduce the chances of inflammation and Chirin. This medicine isn't difficult to produce, takes a short time to produce, and can be widely used. Other than me, no one else knows about it. I think its value shouldn't be any lower than the black mud cream. After Rinpoche finished speaking, Qin Zixing first asked a few questions about the diseases that Rinpoche mentioned. After all, he didn't understand many of the terms that Rinpoche mentioned. However, after combining his many years of medical experience and asking Rinpoche about the parts that he didn't understand, he understood everything. There was no doubt that the medicine that Rinpoche mentioned was valuable. The effect of the black mud cream was indeed good, but its greatest value lay in the fact that the so-called Chirin would not appear during an extreme period. In his eyes, the length of the recovery process was secondary. After all, he was a doctor and not a businessman. The disadvantages of the black mud cream were also very obvious. The raw materials were scarce, the price was high, and it couldn't be widely used. A large number of patients who couldn't afford the black mud cream would either die or have their limbs amputated due to infection and Chirin. The medicine that Rinpoche mentioned was the most important point of the black mud cream. In Qin Zixing's eyes, it was easy to produce, the raw materials were cheap, and it could be widely used. Qin Zixing pondered for a long time and asked, "How difficult is it to produce this medicine?" "It's not difficult. I can teach you the entire set of cultivation, separation, and manufacturing methods of penicillin. If what you said is true, I can exchange the formula with you." Qin Zixing nodded his head. Chapter 29. Prepare some fruits first and put them in a place. After a period of time, when the fruits have rotted and become moldy, collect the layer of green mold on them. After that, I will tell you the extraction method, Rinpoche said. Sure. The penicillin you mentioned is the hair that grows after the fruits have rotted? Qin Zixing asked. Without waiting for Rinpoche's reply, he asked another question. The terminology you mentioned just now is different from what I know. I have never heard of it. Where did you learn it from? This is a medical technique from the distant West. We call it Western medicine, Rinpoche said. If you want to learn, I can show you 2 Western medicine books. Upon hearing this, Qin Zixing was overjoyed. He stood up from his chair and cupped his hands towards Rinpoche. Thank you, brother. Rinpoche waved his hand. He hesitated for a while and was about to tell Qin Zixing about another matter. Typhoid fever was a very troublesome disease in ancient times. It had the highest mortality rate. Even in modern times, many people died every year because they didn't receive treatment in time. In modern times, chloramphenicol was the main treatment for typhoid fever. However, it was difficult to produce because of the lack of resources. Rinpoche was prepared to exchange for penicillin and treatise on typhoid and miscellaneous diseases if he didn't have enough penicillin. However, now that penicillin could be exchanged for the formula for the black mud cream, there was no use for him to keep these 2 medical books. The Qin Medicine Hall had always had a good reputation. It treated commoners at a low price and had a high reputation in Lan City. Rinpoche was prepared to give these 2 books to Qin Zixing. It could be considered as doing a good deed for this world. Rinpoche thought to himself, I will bring these 2 medical books the next time I come here. What was more troublesome was that the language here was the same as Chinese, but the words were different. He probably had to read them to Qin Zixing. We will take our leave then. I will come back in 4 to 5 days after I have prepared the things. Ren Baqian stood up and left. Chen Zixing sent the two of them to the door. You can treat typhoid fever? Caretaker Shi asked Ren Baqian after he left. There is indeed a way to treat it. Ren Baqian nodded. Caretaker Shi sighed. It would be great if you came 10 years earlier. Upon hearing this, Ren Baqian knew that Chen Zixing's relatives and friends had passed away because of this disease. But how old was I 10 years ago? At that time, I didn't understand anything. Caretaker Shi squeezed out a smile. That's true. It's not too late to come. After that, Caretaker Shi lost interest in talking. After that, Ren Baqian made a trip to the blacksmith shop where he made the box previously. He ordered a few fan blades and bearings to make an indigenous fan. He drew what he wanted on the map and gave it to the other party. The boss immediately said, "This is simple. Come back to collect it in 2 days." After finishing his meal, he returned to the Beast Park and went to the ice house to take a look. Nominally, he was in charge of this ice cellar, but why did he not come here more than a few times? Fortunately, the odd job workers arranged by Caretaker Shi were very efficient, which saved him a lot of trouble. Now that the ice cellar was full, they were resting. Ren Baqian waved his hand and said, "Everyone, put a piece of ice under your bed at night and have a good sleep. Anyway, as long as the ice cellar was full, it would be fine. If there were more, he might as well make the best use of it." "Thank you very much, Caretaker Ren." The 10 of them chuckled. This was a good thing for them. After taking a stroll around the ice cellar, Ren Baqian saw that they had nothing to do, so he called a few of them to follow him back to prepare seedlings for the sweet potatoes. When he returned, he saw 2 panda cubs lying in the shade. They looked so hot that they were unwilling to get up. Ren Baqian fetched a basin of water, lifted the 2 little chaps, and threw them into the basin. The 2 little chaps immediately crawled out of the basin while groaning. It seemed like they did not like soaking in the basin of water. After walking 1 round on the ground, they were covered in mud. When Ren Baqian saw that the 2 little chaps wanted to rub against his body, he quickly took 2 steps away. Tian Tian and Gun Gun groaned as they crawled back to the shade and continued to stay there. Not long after, their fur was dry. This time, the 2 little chaps shook their heads and crawled back into the basin to wet their fur before coming out again. Ren Baqian had to admit that these 2 little chaps were quite smart. "Caretaker Ren, this flower bear's meat is not tasty. It's useless to keep it." The one who spoke was called Ting Dilong. He was very strong and honest. However, the moment he opened his mouth, he mentioned that the meat was not tasty. Ren Baqian felt like giving him a kick. "In your eyes, this panda has no other use other than being eaten, right? I'm keeping it for fun." Ren Baqian casually said, "In the future, when I'm not in the Beast Park, look after these 2 chaps. Feed them some water and bamboo leaves. You all know where to get the bamboo leaves, right?" "Understood, Caretaker Ren, don't worry," the few of them replied. Ren Baqian then pulled out the bag containing the sweet potatoes from under the bed. He guided them bit by bit. First, he cut the sweet potatoes into small pieces and hung them on a wooden stick. Then, he filled a basin with water and placed the wooden stick on top of the basin. He ensured that half of the sweet potatoes were submerged in water and the other half was exposed. This way, after the sweet potatoes germinated, they could be used for planting. After he finished teaching them these things, someone from the palace came to call Ren Baqian into the palace. This time, it was Shi who came. He pulled Ren Baqian aside and asked, "I heard that you made a bet with the people from the Imperial Kitchen?" "You can say so. I mainly wanted to broaden their horizons," Ren Baqian said happily. He turned around and pulled out the bag from under the bed. He took out a small bag of every kind of seasoning, wrapped them in cloth, and carried them away. "These are the things you prepared?" Shi asked curiously as he looked at Ren Baqian packing the small bags of seasoning. He had heard about the incident with the Imperial Kitchen. Logically speaking, the Imperial Kitchen had the best chefs in the country. What they said should be right. However, Ren Baqian appeared out of thin air in the army that day and was able to make ice on such a hot day. Shi felt that Ren Baqian was rather mysterious and felt that Ren Baqian had a higher chance of winning. Now that he saw Ren Baqian packing so many things, He knew that these were Rinpoche's preparations. When they arrived at the imperial kitchen and saw that Rinpoche had arrived, everyone stood up. Previously, when Rinpoche made the bet, everyone was present. These people had been waiting to teach Rinpoche a lesson for a few days. Finally, the day had arrived. Caretaker Rin, take out the seasoning that you mentioned. If you don't have it, don't blame me for breaking your legs and hanging them on the city wall. Caretaker Go had a fierce look on his face and spoke with a fierce tone. He really didn't believe that Rinpoche could take out a few seasonings that he had never seen before. One had to know that the spices that could be used were all in the imperial kitchen. Even if there were other spices, they would be unknown or in a faraway place. How could Rinpoche take out spices that he had never seen before in a few days? Caretaker Go didn't believe it at all. The others were also waiting to watch the show and teach this bastard who spoke nonsense a lesson. Hey, let me broaden your horizons. In the future, remember to stand at attention and call me brother when you see me. Rinpoche wasn't angry at all and said cheerfully. As he spoke, he opened the cloth bag. Inside, there were small bags of things. See, this is star anise, this is cinnamon, this is monosodium glutamate, this is sesame, this is cumin, this is pepper, and this is 13 spices. You have never seen them before, right? Rinpoche said one by one. Seeing him take out such a pile of things, those people didn't look good. Immediately, someone said, who knows if those things are real or fake? Chapter 30. Caretaker Go slapped the chef's head, turned around, and squatted in front of Rinpoche with a cold face. He took out a little from each packet and put it in his mouth to taste. After tasting a few of them, his facial expression changed. As a chef, he felt that at least 2 of them could be used as spices. However, he still had to see how they were used and what kind of smell they would emit after being cooked. There were many things that had a smell, but not all of them could be used as spices. However, he was no longer so sure at this point in time. He stood up and looked at Rinpoche with a complicated gaze. He clenched his teeth for a long time before saying, "You cook, we will watch from the side. If these are really spices for cooking, I will call you brother when I see you in the future. In that case, you guys have profited." When Rinpoche spoke, Caretaker Go and the rest's faces turned black. They wanted to scold him, but they suppressed their anger. They would settle the score after Rinpoche was done cooking. However, many of them looked at Rinpoche's relaxed expression and suspected that they would not have the chance to settle the score. The imperial kitchen was probably going to be wiped out this time. Rinpoche no longer paid attention to them. He walked 2 rounds in the imperial kitchen and remained silent. Finally, he found half a leg of a beast from the corner of the wall. He had seen this kind of meat in the kitchens of the beast park. It was the kind of animal that pulled carts on the streets, but it looked like an enlarged version of a goat. It had a strong odor, but it tasted very good. He felt that it was much more delicious than the mutton on earth. Who can help me cut it into slices? 1 plate is enough. Rinpoche turned his head and asked the crowd at the entrance. His knife skills could not be compared to these chefs, so he did not want to embarrass himself. You go. Caretaker Go clenched his teeth, but still chose someone to help Rinpoche. Following which, Rinpoche took out another piece of meat, turned his head to look at the crowd, and revealed a smile that he thought was friendly. The meaning behind it was self-evident. The people in the imperial kitchen looked at him and were so angry that their teeth itched. This time, it was another person who walked towards Rinpoche with a kitchen knife. If this was on Earth, it would look like he was taking revenge on society. Rinpoche would definitely hide as far away as possible. However, the people of Dayo all looked like this, so Rinpoche did not care. Instead, he exhorted, cut it into small pieces, 1 layer of fat and 1 layer of lean meat with some skin. Seeing that the 2 people were cutting, Rinpoche found 2 cucumbers and washed them. He then slapped them on the chopping board twice before chopping them into pieces. Yes, that's right, this is the cucumber with garlic sauce. It's a pity that there's no peeling. Later, I'll fry some peanuts and mix them together. After the meat was cut and washed, Rinpoche marinated it with cumin, the spices of this world, and Sichuan peppercorns. He would prepare cumin lamb and braised it and braid. Rin lamb Rin prepared. Water. However, Chen said he, and. Why is this wok so heavy? Shen, I, and he, I, and of. Although adults could move it, it was impossible for them to flip the spoon with one hand. Of. Rin Baqian put it aside. He estimated that it weighed at least 7 to 8 kilograms. Rin Baqian turned his head and saw that the two men had gone back to stand and watch. He gestured with his hand and said, I will tell you what to do, and you too will do it. They can't even stir-fry. How can they cook like this? Someone muttered. Ren Baqian spread his hands helplessly. The frying ladles in this world were too heavy. He thought about the kitchen knife he took just now and realized that it wasn't light either. Was it their habit or something else? Or did the important things feel good to the touch? Ren Baqian felt that it was highly possible that these chefs were burly and could fit two of him. The two chefs walked over reluctantly. Ren Baqian instructed one of them to stir-fry the brown sugar and soy sauce until they were bubbling. Then he added some spices that resembled scallions and ginger. Finally, he stir-fried the meat. Ren Baqian had to use one hand to pick up the wok, but the Dayo people handled it as if it was a piece of paper. This made Ren Baqian realize the gap between him and the Dayo people. Other than the two chefs, the rest were watching from a distance. Although they didn't like Ren Baqian, they focused their attention on him. This was because they had never done the process of stir-frying the sugar before. When the nutmeg, star anise, and cinnamon were added, the aroma wafted out. The entire imperial kitchen could smell the aroma. The eyes of the surrounding chefs lit up when they smelled it. Apart from other ingredients, the aroma alone was too tempting and fragrant. The other ingredients were from their place, but they had never made such an aroma before. It could only be said that Ren Baqian had indeed brought seasonings that could improve the quality of the dishes. Ren Baqian instructed the other chef to stir-fry the cumin lamb while the other ingredients were simmered. Once the cumin was put in, a strong and fragrant cumin aroma wafted out. It was something that these chefs had never smelled before. This time, everyone couldn't stand still and crowded over. Ren Baqian first scooped the cumin lamb into a small plate. He ate a piece, smiled, and passed the plate to Caretaker Go. Try it? Caretaker Go took the plate with a sullen face. When it was slightly cold, he used 2 fingers to pick up a piece, put it in his mouth, and carefully tasted it. He then passed the plate to the chefs behind him. Each of them quickly took a piece and put it in their mouth. Their eyes immediately lit up. The fishy smell of the meat was greatly reduced. It was even more tender and delicious, especially with the fragrance of the cumin. It was simply praiseworthy. After eating one piece, when they wanted to look for more, they realized that the plate was already empty. How is it? Ren Baqian smiled. Caretaker Go clenched his teeth and stared at Ren Baqian. Finally, he lowered his head and said, Brother Ren. Not bad, not bad. Ren Baqian clapped his hands and smiled. He then looked at the other chefs. Brother Ren. Seeing that Caretaker Go had already called him, everyone could only open their mouths. Hearing the 7 or 8 burly men calling him Brother Ren, Ren Baqian felt at ease and said, All right, just remember to call me brother when you see me in the future. Calling me Brother Ren sounds weird. The chefs at the scene all felt sullen. However, who asked them to lose the bet? Since Caretaker Go had already called him, how could they not? Who would have thought that this guy from the Beast Park would actually take out so many seasonings that they had never seen before? When the red braised meat was ready, Ren Baqian divided it into 2 portions, one large and one small. He first tasted it before passing it to Caretaker Go. After eating this fragrant, soft and melt-in-your-mouth red braised meat, everyone's sullen feelings were thrown to the side. They only wanted to know what these seasonings were. Where exactly did he get them from? Chapter 31. Ren Baqian covered the cumin lamb and red braised meat with a lid and asked them to fry some peanuts. This time, without Caretaker Go's instructions, someone took the initiative to do it. Now, everyone wanted to know from Ren Baqian what these spices were all about. Regarding this question, Ren Baqian did not hide it. After all, it was just some spices. It was fine as long as he could show off in the imperial kitchen. This is cumin. All of you have tried it just now. It can remove the fishy smell and increase the tenderness of the meat. Another very important function is that it has a little preservative effect. After all, the weather is so hot and a dish won't be kept for long after it is cooked. Cumin can slow down the deterioration of the taste of the dish. Even though some of the terms were different, everyone could easily understand what Rinpoche said. "Where can I buy this cumin?" someone immediately asked. The others looked over expectantly. However, they did not know if Rinpoche would tell them. After all, they had never seen this before. It was considered a unique item and its value could be imagined. "Wait for me to plant some and see how the output is." Rinpoche thought for a while and said, "Can you sell it to us?" "Of course." Rinpoche spread his hands. "What else can I do if I don't sell it? I don't intend to be a chef." Previously, Rinpoche mentioned spices that they had never heard of. Their impression of Rinpoche was that he was full of nonsense. In addition, he did not look like a Dayo citizen, so they were extremely disgusted with him. When Rinpoche really took out the spices, their attitude began to change. When Rinpoche agreed to sell them the spices, their eyes were already burning with eagerness. After all, the attitude of other people towards Dayo was barbaric and irritable. However, they had to admit that they were all straightforward people. They would say one thing and say another. Rinpoche ignored them and continued, "This is star anise, nutmeg, cinnamon, pepper." He explained all the spices to them. After listening to him, everyone in the imperial kitchen almost worshipped Rinpoche. Not to mention calling him brother, they could even call him uncle. The spices that Rinpoche took out were an eye-opener for them. With these spices, they were confident that they could make more dishes. Furthermore, the taste was more than one grade higher than before. After Rinpoche explained it to them, it was much easier to instruct them to work. He crushed the fried peanuts, chopped the spicy green fruits and tossed them in. Then he put the cucumbers in and mixed them with salt, brown sugar, monosodium glutamate, and minced garlic. Everyone tasted it and asked him what the white granules were that weren't explained. Rinpoche shook his head and said, I'm afraid this thing can't be produced in a short period of time." Hearing him say that, although everyone felt a little regretful, they had already gained a lot. One had to know that the imperial kitchen only had soy sauce, vinegar, brown sugar, salt, and a few vegetables similar to onions, ginger, garlic, and chili. This time around, Rinpoche had taken out 6 or 7 of them, which made them feel as if they had opened the door to a whole new world. "Send the dishes to Her Majesty," Rinpoche said to Caretaker Go. Caretaker Go cupped his fists at Rinpoche and said, "Whatever you say in the imperial kitchen from now on." Then, he got someone to put together a fruit and sent it to Her Majesty. Rinpoche walked around and saw that there were still ice cubes in the corner. He said to the rest of the imperial kitchen staff, "Find a box and put the ice cubes in it. Then put the vegetables, fruits, and meat in it. It can be stored for a longer period of time. The hotter the weather, the faster the food will go bad. The lower the temperature, the longer it can be stored." Now, everyone was just short of worshipping Rinpoche like a god. After hearing what he said, they immediately nodded their heads and prepared to find someone to make a box and follow Rinpoche's instructions. Caretaker Go and the rest sent the dishes into the palace. Just as they opened the lid, they could smell the aroma of the red braised pork from afar. The 2 maids beside the empress secretly swallowed their saliva. "I have never seen this dish before," the empress took a glance and said casually. "It's made by Caretaker Ren. I have never seen this dish before, but the taste is indeed not bad," Caretaker Go said in full detail. "I remember now. You guys even made a bet, right? Last time, you said it was that fellow with the surname Ren. This time, it's Caretaker Ren. Did he win?" The empress sat up slightly and said, "Indeed he won. He took out a few spices that I have never seen before. Your Majesty will know after you taste it," Caretaker Go said. The empress nodded her head slightly. When the poison was served to her, the first thing she tasted was the red braised pork. The aroma of this dish was the strongest and it made her feel a little hungry. Originally, it looked a little greasy, but after eating a mouthful of the red braised pork, it didn't feel greasy at all. It was fragrant and glutinous. Especially, the flavors brought about by the few spices that she had never tasted before made the Empress nod her head. Very good. What is this called? Red braised pork, Caretaker Go said. The name doesn't sound good, but it's indeed not bad. Following which, she ate the lamb with cumin. Even though it didn't look much different from what she usually ate, with the addition of cumin, the lamb became even more tender. The fishy smell was also reduced by half. Coupled with the fragrance of cumin, the Empress was similarly full of praise. Today, the Empress ate a lot more. Even though her every move was still elegant, her speed was much faster. When the dishes were finally served, Caretaker Go looked at the amount of food on the plate and knew that the Empress had eaten half more than usual. This was extremely rare. It could be seen that Her Majesty really liked these new dishes. Very good, very good. Do this again tomorrow. In addition, you can look for him to learn a few more new dishes. The Empress stood up and said as she walked a few steps on the ground. Yes, Your Majesty. Aren't you going to arrange for Caretaker Ren to work in the Imperial kitchen? Caretaker Go asked. Even though he hated Rinpoche's attitude at the start, when Rinpoche took out the real stuff, he also approved of Rinpoche. Furthermore, not only was Rinpoche familiar with all kinds of spices, he was also proficient in many new dishes that he had never seen before. It would be a pity to continue to work in the Beast Park. Regardless of whether Rinpoche was to be the head chef or the assistant chef in the Imperial kitchen, Caretaker Go had no opinion. Forget about him, I have my own arrangements. Go back and ask him to tell me about that romance of the Three Kingdoms. Qin Yuan, follow him and bring him here. Yes, Your Majesty, a tall and good-looking female attendant who was about 20 years old answered softly. After leaving the palace hall, the female attendant opened the lid of the dish and secretly tasted a piece. Her eyes immediately lit up. Just now when she smelled it, she felt that it was very similar. Only after tasting it did she know how delicious it was. Oh, it's indeed delicious. After satisfying her curiosity, Qin Yuan sucked the grease off her fingers. She placed both her hands behind her back and rolled her eyes. Brother, Ren, Her Majesty asked you to tell him about Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Caretaker Go said to Rinpoche when he entered the courtyard of the Imperial kitchen and saw him sitting there in a daze. Chapter 32. Rinpoche followed Qin Yuan into the palace. The Empress was still reclining on the couch. It seemed that she would do this every time he saw her. She liked to recline. In other words, Rinpoche suddenly noticed a problem. The couch was very wide. A normal person sitting on it wouldn't be able to lean against the back. Furthermore, it would be very far away. It would definitely be uncomfortable to sit like this. This discovery made Rinpoche think of something. However, he quickly withdrew his thoughts and continued to narrate Romance of the Three Kingdoms, not far away from the Empress. After narrating for 2 rounds, the sky was already dark. The Empress then asked him to stop. You disappear every 3 days. What are you doing? The Empress asked lazily while squinting her phoenix eyes. Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. Beads of perspiration rolled down his back and forehead. Although he knew that this day would come, he still wanted to hide it for a period of time. This was because he couldn't explain his disappearance every 3 days. When he was discovered, the higher his status, the more secure his safety would be. Previously, when he found out that the people of Dayo were all boorish and straightforward people, he was more or less relieved. He thought that perhaps he wouldn't be discovered so quickly. When he was in prison, no one should have discovered him. He didn't expect to be discovered after leaving twice. Although the Empress had a lazy look on her face, Rinpoche suspected that he would be beheaded if he didn't answer well. Both of you can leave. The Empress waved her hand at the maids beside her. Following which, the hall fell into silence. The Empress lay on the couch with one hand supporting her head and waited for Rinpoche's answer. Rinpoche's forehead was dripping with sweat. He kept asking himself, what should I do? Should I tell the truth or tell a big lie? How can I make the person in front of me believe me without giving myself away? Ren Baqian hesitated for a long time and was prepared to tell a big lie. If he couldn't hide it, he would tell the truth. Your Majesty, forget it. I don't want to listen to lies. I know you have secrets. Everyone has secrets. When you appeared, it was very unexpected. Naturally, you have more secrets than others. It doesn't matter if your background is unknown. I don't care where China is. However, you have to show your value. As long as you have the ability, I can use you. I can give you whatever you want. Go down. Just as Rinpochen was about to open his mouth, the Empress suddenly spoke. Rinpochen didn't know whether he should be happy or sad about the content of her words. He was happy that after hearing the Empress's words, she would no longer pursue the matter of his origins and his disappearance every 3 days. In the future, he could be at ease. Even if he suddenly disappeared, the Empress wouldn't say anything as long as he displayed his ability and value. He didn't have to rack his brains to figure out how to hide his whereabouts anymore. The sad thing was, who said that the brains of the people of Dayo were all muscles? The Empress seemed to have seen through him. She could even detect that he was lying. This made Rinpochen feel a little terrified. It was like playing a game, and suddenly the natives in the game pointed out that you were not from this world. It was a frightening feeling. When he returned to the Beast Park, he felt much better after being blown by the night breeze. In any case, it was a good thing that the Empress didn't pursue the matter. However, he had to be more attentive in the future. Just as he returned to his room, Tian Tian and Gun Gun hugged his legs and whimpered, refusing to let go. Rinpochen squatted down and stroked the two little chaps. Even though his heart was still palpitating, he had mostly calmed down. He first filled a basin of water for the two little chaps and fetched some bamboo leaves. The two little chaps sat in the bamboo leaves and grabbed the bamboo leaves on the ground to eat. Only Rinpochen returned to his room to rest. After thinking about the Empress's words over and over again, he fell into a deep sleep. The next day, he woke up and looked at the sweet potatoes. They had already been processed and were waiting to germinate. Rinpochen first looked for Caretaker Sher and brought him to look at the land for planting sweet potatoes. Near the Beast Park, there was a piece of flat land that had been cultivated. There were some fruits and vegetables planted on it. Most of the food that the odd job workers in the Beast Park ate was grown here. Usually, there were some elderly people and women who were the family members of the odd job workers here to take care of the land. What do you think of this place? The vegetables are also ripe. I will get someone to pluck them now, Caretaker Sher said as he led him to a piece of land. Let's walk around a bit more. It doesn't have to be so big for now. 1 mu is enough, Rinpochen said. After walking half around, he saw a small piece of land at an oblique corner. It was about 1 mu in size. The location was a little remote and the land wasn't the best. However, Rinpochen didn't mind. Anyway, the requirements for planting sweet potatoes weren't high. It was better to plant them in a more remote location. Let's do it here. The land here is ordinary. The harvest will be slightly worse, Caretaker Sher advised. It's all right, this is fine. Rinpochen smiled. The location of this land was rather remote. However, it was just right. No one would notice what he planted. Can these 2 pieces be used? Thinking of the spices that he brought back, he pointed to the land not far away and asked. Caretaker Sher looked in the direction that Rinpochen was pointing at. He patted his chest and said, "No problem. Even though the Beast Park doesn't have a lot of land, a few pieces of land can still be allocated." After confirming the location, Caretaker Sher hurriedly left to settle the matter of the shaved ice shop. The other 2 shops had also been purchased. Now, all 3 shops had to be cleaned up. They also had to find a carpenter to make a bar counter and a bench. Rinpochen had already taught Caretaker Sher the method of making ice. It was very simple. All he had to do was to know where to find saltpeter. As for making fruit shaved ice, it was even simpler. Rinpochen didn't need to participate in the subsequent matters. He just needed to split the profits. After choosing the land, the sweet potatoes hadn't germinated yet. Rinpochen had nothing to do, so he went to look for the odd job worker who knew how to do carpentry. He asked him to make a weird-looking chair according to his requirements. Ren Baqien wanted to make a sofa. He thought of it when he saw the Empress's couch. A sofa that could sink one's entire body into would definitely be more comfortable than a couch. Naturally, he would make a sofa for the Empress first. Then, he would make one for himself. Soon after, he began to look for fillers for the sofa in the Beast Park. Anything like cotton or bird feathers would do. Even though cotton wasn't available in Dayo, there were plenty of bird feathers in the Beast Park. Every day, a lot of them were cleared out and all of them were burned as rubbish. After getting someone to keep it for him, Ren Baqien realized that the people of Dayo actually didn't know how to tan leather. Leather was taken from animals and dried in the sun. Then, it was sold in bundles to those leather merchants. Naturally, the price was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. If one wanted to buy tanned leather from the merchants, the price would make one flinch. An ordinary sheepskin, the kind that belonged to a giant sheepskin that pulled a cart, could only be sold for 1 tael of silver. However, tanned sheepskin could be sold for 10 taels of silver each. Just thinking about the profits involved made one go crazy. It was no wonder that foreign merchants flocked to Dayo. Even if it was so hot here that they could die, there was nothing to enjoy. Profits that were several times or even more than 10 times could make most people take the risk out of desperation. Chapter 33. When he woke up again, he looked around the unfamiliar room. He shook his head with all his might and finally became a little more clear-headed. Yesterday afternoon, he went to the palace to recite Romance of the Three Kingdoms to the Empress. At night, he was dragged along by caretaker Shur and a few other caretakers to drink until midnight. The alcohol content in that world was not high, but it was very strong. After drinking too much, my head hurts like hell. He went to the bathroom to wash his face and looked at himself in the mirror. During this period of time, he had become much darker and more muscular. It couldn't be helped. In that world, they ate meat for almost every meal, and there were fewer things like noodles and vegetables. After a period of time, it was easier for people to gain weight. Turning on his phone, there were 3 missed calls. 2 of them were from Qin Qing, and the last one was from someone that surprised him. It was Dong Haiqing, whom he had exchanged phone numbers with the other day. I don't know why she called. Ren Baqien thought about it. She seemed to have said that she wanted to get together with her local classmates. It should be about this. He didn't plan to return the call. Instead, he went online to search for the methods of tanning furs and skins. From several tanning methods, he chose 2. One was the alum tanning method, and the other was the tanning method. He needed alum and mirabilite respectively. Both of them could be found in that world. After all, he couldn't bring the materials back by himself every time. After daybreak, he went out for breakfast and drove to buy alum and mirabilite. Then, he went to a few iron and welding shops to find someone to make a homemade fan. This was something that Ren Baqien had just thought of. After all, people in modern society knew a lot about fans, so it was easy to make them. He could take the finished product back and find someone to copy it. He went to a few shops and offered 3,000 yuan. Finally, someone accepted the job and could collect it the next day. Furthermore, the other party's words reminded him of something else, the air cooler. This was also very easy to make. They just needed to put a box outside the fan and put a curtain in front of it to guide the water. As for the water circulation system, there was no need to consider it. When the time came, it would be easier to put a water tank on top and pour water in. He bought some food and went home. Every time he woke up, it was already the 10th day. The food in the fridge had to be changed every time. After a few times, most of the food in the fridge was sausages, which were not easy to spoil. Just as he reached home, his phone rang. Ren Baqien saw an unfamiliar name on the screen. It was Dong Haiqing. After some thought, he answered the phone on the 5th ring. Ren Baqien? 8,000 years old? Dong Haiqing's voice came from the other end of the line. When Ren Baqien heard this nickname that he hadn't heard for a long time, he felt slightly embarrassed. Ever since he was young, he had only had this nickname. Regardless of the new environment, it wouldn't take long for this nickname to be called again. It had to be said that in certain aspects, people's thoughts were similar. Dong Haiqing didn't mention it the last time they met, so he thought she had forgotten about it. He didn't expect it to be brought up this time. It's me. It's really not easy to find you. Dong Haiqing laughed heartily on the other end of the phone. I just came back from out of town. Oh? Are you going to the class reunion tonight? You're the only one left in the city, Dong Haiqing asked. Poor they. After Ren Baqian finished asking, Dong Haiqing mentioned 6 names, including Chen Bing, who was mentioned the other day. He didn't know anyone, or rather, he didn't know anyone in school. Even if they were roommates, they only nodded at each other. What? Do we have to see if there's a girl of our dreams at a class reunion? Is it so difficult to invite Baqiansui now? Dong Haiqing said. All right, I'll go, Ren Baqian said helplessly. That's settled then. I'll send you the address at 6 p.m. Dong Haiqing hung up the phone. Ren Baqian turned on the television and stared blankly for a while. Then, he went online to search for information. After all, he couldn't go online every time he discovered a problem. Although it was fortunate to be able to travel between the two worlds. However, Ren Baqian couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to travel to another world after he returned. It would be fine if he stayed on Earth, but if he stayed in that world, it would be better to memorize the knowledge. In the afternoon, Ren Baqian calculated that it was about time. After taking a shower, he found a t-shirt and went out. The restaurant for the class reunion wasn't considered big. After all, they had just graduated and didn't have much money. But from the outside, the restaurant looked quite exquisite. Dong Haiqing and another pretty girl were standing at the entrance. Seeing Ren Baqian's Audi A6L, Dong Haiqing's eyes lit up. You're here. I've created an opportunity for both of you. You must grasp it. I really didn't realize that Ren Baqian had such a strong foundation. The other girl was naturally Chen Bing. When she was in school, there was a period of time when she was attracted to Ren Baqian. She even had the thought of pursuing him. In the end, after Dong Haiqing found out, she said, Ren Baqian doesn't have the looks, doesn't have the family background, and doesn't have the ability. She thought about it for a long time, but in the end, nothing came of it. Back then, the unripe fruit in his heart had quietly rotted away and fallen to an unknown place. During this class reunion, Dong Haiqing suddenly told her to grasp the opportunity to see if she could get together with Ren Baqian. She also said that she found out that Ren Baqian was actually a rich second-generation heir. This made her feel an indescribable feeling in her heart. She felt a little bitter and wanted to cry. Hey, Ren Baqian, you're finally here. If I don't invite you today, I won't be able to explain myself, Dong Haiqing shouted at Ren Baqian, who had just gotten out of the car. Ren Baqian waved his hand. When he entered the restaurant, he saw Dong Haiqing and Chen Bing standing there. Long time no see. You seem to be doing well. Chen Bing sorted out her emotions and greeted Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian didn't know what to say. A month ago, he was still earning a salary of 3,000 to 4,000 yuan and living in a cramped room. A year's salary was only enough to keep himself warm. But now, he had become someone who made a name for himself in the eyes of others. For a moment, he couldn't adapt to this change. Let's go. Everyone has gone in. You're the only one left, Dong Haiqing said to him. When they entered the private room, there were already 5 people sitting inside, 3 guys and 2 girls. When they saw Ren Baqian, they were stunned. Then one of them asked, Ren Baqian, you're Lu Zidong, right? I haven't seen you for a year and you've put on so much weight. Ren Baqian smiled and extended his hand to shake hands. The person in front of him had a square face and looked to be at least 180 kilograms. Ren Baqian remembered that when he was in school, he was only 120 kilograms. He didn't expect him to put on so much weight in just a year. I'm Su Li. We've been classmates for 4 years, but Ren Baqian doesn't even remember me. This is really embarrassing. Su Li mocked himself. The others also laughed. This time, it was Ren Baqian's turn to be embarrassed. He had just graduated for a year, but he actually recognized the wrong classmates. The other 4 people were Guokai, who wore very small spectacles, Chi Kai, who had a clean appearance and neatly combed hair, and the other 2 girls, Zhang Xiaotong and Miao Feifei. Their looks were considered average. Chapter 34. Everyone sat down and chatted while waiting for the dishes to be served. They reminisced about their school days and were rather harmonious. There were no pretentious scenes like in novels. After all, they had just graduated and the gap between them wasn't huge. Su Li had opened a seafood shop with the help of his family and it was doing well. The rest of them were working. When the dishes were served and everyone filled their cups, Dong Haiqing raised her glass and said, "We have been classmates for 4 years and now we are gathered here again after graduating. We are all fated. We should interact more in the future so that we won't drift apart." After finishing her sentence, she downed her glass immediately. Seeing that she was so straightforward, everyone felt embarrassed to hide it and drank it all in one gulp. After drinking a glass of wine, everyone became much more friendly. Ren Baqien listened at the side and rarely interrupted. He didn't participate much in school matters and had nothing to say. Dong Haiqing and Zhang Bing asked him about it from time to time and tried to lead him into their conversation. Unfortunately, Ren Baqien had nothing to say and would stop after 1 or 2 sentences. After 3 rounds of drinking, Guokai, who had the lowest tolerance for alcohol, started to talk about his company's prospects and how he was valued by the leaders. Su Li, Guokai, Miao Feifei and the rest responded from time to time, which made Guokai even more enthusiastic. The other Guo Xiaotong was already covering her head with her hands and basically didn't say a word. It seemed like she didn't usually drink, but she drank a lot today. Ren Baqien could tell that Guokai's gaze was always on Chen Bing, who was beside him. Dong Haiqing was too gorgeous and Guokai felt that he couldn't match up to her. Chen Bing wasn't bad looking either. She gave off an innocent vibe and was the type that many men liked. Even though her legs were a flaw, a long dress could completely cover it up and she would be very eye-catching when she walked on the streets. Therefore, it was normal for Guokai to be interested in her. In the animal kingdom, birds had to display their beautiful feathers in order to woo their mates. Animals had to show their claws and teeth and compete with other males. Humans did the same. Whether it was appearance, height, temperament, character, skills, future, or money, they were no different from birds displaying their feathers. It was just that some people cared more about appearance, some cared more about character, some cared more about potential, and some directly expressed that they only cared about money. As Ren Baqien was thinking about this, he felt a little bored as he watched the few of them chatting animatedly. While Guokai was displaying his feathers, Chen Bing's attention was never on him. From time to time, she would turn her head and tell him about the interesting things that happened during her work. Ren Baqien, on the other hand, was focused on listening to her. The way the two of them whispered to each other, in Guokai's opinion, made Guokai somewhat unable to restrain himself. He originally thought that he would have a chance to meet his old classmates here, but the other party seemed to be more interested in Ren Baqien, which made him somewhat indignant. What did the other party have more than him? Wasn't he just a little better looking? In society, it was more important to look at ability, connections, and to put it bluntly, money. Even though he didn't have one now, Guokai reckoned that his future was much better than Ren Baqien's. Yes, even though Ren Baqien didn't have the face of a celebrity, he was still considered delicate and pretty. It was easy for people to have a good impression of him. Although he wasn't as strong as him, he was more than enough to surpass him. Once again, when Chen Bing whispered to Ren Baqien, Guokai couldn't help but ask, "Baqiansui, what have you been up to recently?" Ren Baqien tilted his head. He seemed to have asked this question just now. Seeing that the other party was still looking at him, he replied, "I haven't done anything. I'm just squatting at home and living off the leftovers." Guokai nodded his head and didn't say anything else. After all, he had already entered society and wasn't a fool. He wouldn't say things that were too overboard. All he wanted was for Ren Baqien to say it once more. Ren Baqien also smiled. He knew what the other party was thinking. However, looking at Guokai's flushed face, he knew that he had drunk too much. Dong Haiqing looked at Guokai, then looked at Ren Baqien. She didn't tell him that Ren Baqien was a second-generation nouveau riche and that he could earn as much as others who had to work their whole lives just by sitting at home. After all, he was a second-generation nouveau riche and they were classmates. This was a scarce resource. She told Chen Bing because Chen Bing wasn't scheming and was easier to manipulate. If Chen Bing and Rinpochen got together, she would also gain a lot of benefits. As for the others, there was no need for her to tell them. It would be best if the others treated Rinpochen as an ordinary student who didn't have a sense of presence in school. The few of them drank some more. After Guokai had overdosed, he drank cup after cup. He sat there swaying. Dong Haiqing said, "I think everyone has drunk enough. We still have to work tomorrow. Let's call it a day. Let's meet another day. Let's exchange contact details and keep in touch in the future. Since everyone has just started work, let's go Dutch. Let's see how much it costs later. Don't mind, going Dutch is looking down on us guys. Today's meal is on me," Su Li said. "Forget it, I'm happy to see my old classmate today. I'll pay for it. I'll fight with whoever tries to snatch it from me," Guokai said as he pulled Su Li aside. He stood up and rushed to pay the bill. In any case, Rinpochen didn't care how he was going to pay. He could go Dutch or treat himself. However, since Guokai insisted on paying the bill, he simply sat on the stool and didn't move. In the eyes of others, he was just sitting there and waiting for the result. He had no intention of paying at all. After Guokai and Su Li left, Rinpochen looked at the rest of them. Zhang Xiaotong was the only one who needed someone to take care of her. The rest didn't have much of a problem. Hence, Rinpochen followed them out. "What's the matter? Why are you gesticulating with me?" Just as they reached the hall, they heard Guokai's drunken voice. Guokai and Su Li were standing in front of the bar counter. The person they were talking to was a girl behind the counter. She was gesticulating with her hands anxiously. Is this sign language? Rinpochen took a glance. The cashier of the restaurant was a disabled person? This was really strange. He didn't have any opinion on it. Disabled people also needed to work. It was just that it was rare to see them in places like restaurants, especially when they were cashiers. "I told you to pay the bill several times. Why are you pretending not to hear me? Then, you gesticulated with me. Are you pretending to be mute?" Guokai had drunk quite a lot of alcohol just now. At this moment, his face was flushed. He slapped the counter and shouted at the top of his lungs. His voice was drunk and somewhat unclear. However, his words still attracted the attention of many customers. "I'm sorry, sir. And Faye has a hearing impairment. Her hearing aid isn't working today, so she can't hear what you are saying." A waiter in his 20s hurriedly came over to explain when he heard the commotion. The girl named Faye also quickly wrote the words, "I'm sorry," on a piece of paper. Then, she raised it with her hand. All right. Su Li tried to smooth things over with Guokai. Guokai pushed Su Li away and said, "Yo, this is the first time I've met a mute person who can't hear at the bar counter. Your restaurant is really creative." Chapter 35. Guokai wasn't in a good mood today and had drunk a lot. Under the influence of alcohol, even after listening to the waiter's explanation, he still said a few unpleasant words. The girl called Faye looked at him with tears in her eyes. Although she couldn't hear him clearly, she could read his lips. Therefore, she could still understand those two sentences. "I'm not the mute." And Faye said word by word. It seemed that she rarely spoke. Her voice was dry and unclear. You might as well not have said anything at all. Guokai looked drunk. Many regular customers knew that this girl at the front desk had hearing problems. She usually wore a red hearing aid on her ear. They were very sympathetic towards this girl. Therefore, when they heard Guokai's voice, many people looked over angrily. Rinpochen couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled Guokai away and said to the girl called Faye, "Sorry, he drank too much." "Rinpochen, what do you mean? I am just asking. What's wrong? Did I get in your way? Are you trying to be a hero and save the damsel in distress?" Guokai staggered. When he realized that it was Rinpochen who was pulling him, he became even angrier. "Su Li, get him out of here." Rinpochen was disgusted by him. He pushed Guokai away and said to Su Li. When Dong Haiqing and Chen Bing saw the situation, they quickly pulled Guokai out to get some fresh air. Only then did they manage to get him out. "Hey, don't pull me. Let go of me. Let me talk to him." "What's wrong with you, Rinpochen? Are you going to be awesome after graduation? Did I get in your way? Why are you pulling me? Ren Bachien ignored him and turned to look at the girl called Fei. She was wiping her tears at the bar counter. Her eyes were red. I am really sorry. He drank too much. Ignore him, Ren Bachien said. Then he realized that the other party might not be able to hear him. He grabbed a piece of paper and wrote, Sorry, he drank too much. Then he showed it to the girl. The girl's eyes were red as she wrote, It's okay, thank you. Ren Bachien smiled at her and asked the waiter, How much is it? 632 yuan. The waiter looked at the bill on the bar counter and said, Ren Bachien paid the bill and wrote on the paper, Don't care about what other people say. In this world, there are people full of malice, and there are also people with good intentions. You've already done very well. Even though Fei's eyes were filled with tears when she saw what he wrote, she still smiled at him. Write thank you on the paper. Looking at the girl's clean smile, Ren Bachien felt a soft spot in his heart being touched. Ren Bachien waved his hand and left. When he walked out, he heard the waiter say, Scum. Needless to say, he was talking about Guokai. He went out and saw a few people outside. Guokai was sitting on the steps and vomiting all over the ground. He was in a daze. When the wind blows, I vomit. Chen Bing turned around and said to Ren Bachien, Who knows where he lives? Call a taxi and send him back. I know the general location, Chi Kai said. Fei Fei, can you send Zhang Xiaotong back? Dong Haiqing asked Miao Feifei. Su Li followed Miao Feifei and Zhang Xiaotong's car and left with them. Only Dong Haiqing, Zhang Bing, and Ren Bachien were left. Seeing the two taxis leave, Dong Haiqing turned around and said, I didn't know that you could drink so much. I'm still all right. Ren Bachien smiled. His alcohol tolerance was completely trained by Qin Qing. Guokai usually seems to be fine, but today he drank too much and went crazy. I know. Oh yes, have you contacted your friend, Qin Qing, recently? Dong Haiqing asked. I just came back and came here after receiving your call. I haven't contacted him, Ren Bachien replied. Even if he had contacted her, he couldn't tell her. Only God knew what happened between her and Qin Qing. Furthermore, Qin Qing had always been a walking canon. He changed girls every day. Ren Bachien didn't want to get involved in this matter. Alright, I'll make a move first. Bing Bing's place is a little far. Send her off. Leave the car here or find a designated driver. Don't drink and drive. Dong Haiqing gave Chen Bing a hug and waved at Ren Bachien. Even though she was a little scheming, interacting with Dong Haiqing made him feel comfortable. Understood. Goodbye. In the end, only Ren Bachien and Chen Bing were left. Ren Bachien first made a phone call and arranged for a designated driver. After which, he was told that the driver would arrive in half an hour. Wait for a while, Ren Bachien turned and said to Chen Bing. Chen Bing tucked her hair behind her ears and looked at Ren Bachien. You have changed a lot. Really? Ren Bachien touched his face. I haven't seen you for only a year. There shouldn't be much change. Your appearance hasn't changed much, but your entire personality has changed. Chen Bing carefully looked at Ren Bachien's eyes and said, In the past, if I looked at you like this, I wouldn't know where your eyes would be looking. Ren Bachien touched his nose. In the past, he was indeed like this. He didn't like to look at others and would subconsciously look away. In the past, I didn't realize that you were so manly. Chen Bing pursed her lips and smiled. It's a little unexpected. Why do you say that? Just now, when you pulled Guokai away and asked Su Kai to get him out, I didn't expect you to take the initiative to interfere in certain matters. From what I remember, you never took the initiative to participate in anything. Now, my impression of you has changed greatly. You are a man who can be relied on at crucial moments. After Qin Bing finished speaking, she remained silent for a while. She then raised her head and said, If you were so reliable in school, I might have really pursued you. Ren Bachien lowered his head and met Qin Bing's clear and bright eyes. He subconsciously looked away and said, It seems that the impression I gave others in the past was really unreliable. Chen Bing saw that he had shifted his gaze away and looked into the distance nonchalantly. That's right. Think about it. How can a person who is always silent, doesn't participate in anything and never expresses himself be reliable? Renbachian thought for a while and had to admit that what Chenbing said was right. He had always been like that. It seemed that only in that world would he take the initiative to do something. The main reason was that he could see returns for everything he did. Furthermore, he was unique. What he had was something that no one else had. Perhaps it was because of this that he would want to express himself and take the initiative to do something. The two of them chatted idly. After waiting for half an hour, the designated driver finally arrived. After sending Chenbing to her neighborhood, Renbachian then returned to his own place. Lying on the bed, Renbachian thought about tonight's class gathering. He really didn't have any thoughts about Chenbing now. Then, he thought about what he was going to do when he returned to the other world. Should he look for a chef to learn how to cook? Although he could cook a few dishes, they didn't look that good. At most, it would be a fresh experience for others. Chapter 36. After staying at home for 2 days, the next time he woke up, he was awakened by the heat. Just by feeling the stuffy heat in the room, he knew where he was. Looking at the sky outside, the sun had just risen. It was probably around 4 in the morning. He should sleep for a while more. However, it didn't take long for him to break out in a sweat after lying on the bed. He began to miss the air-conditioned room. He held the finished fan in his hand, and there was a rope at the bottom. He pulled the fan and it started to spin. When the rope reached its end, it automatically retracted, and the fan continued to spin in the opposite direction. Although the spinning time was not long, the wind was much stronger than the fan. After playing with the fan for a while, he still felt hot, so he changed his clothes and went out for a walk. He planned to go to the ice house and bring back a block of ice. As soon as he pushed the door open, he saw 2 black and white guys sleeping soundly on the stone slab by the door. Renbachian poked them twice with his finger, and one of them hugged his hand so that he wouldn't do anything funny. Then they went back to sleep. Renbachian carefully withdrew his hand and went straight to the ice house to get a piece of ice. He placed it at the head of the bed and finally felt a little more comfortable. He went back to sleep. When he woke up, it was already 7 or 8 o'clock. First, she looked at the sweet potatoes in the room. The parts that were exposed to the water had already sprouted. In a few days, they could be planted in the ground. He first went to the kitchen to get a bowl of porridge to drink, then dragged 4 or 5 odd job workers to the fields. The crops on the few plots of land that day had already matured. This time, when he came over, he found that the crops had already been picked. Replant these 2 plots of land. Let's plant something good, Renbachian said to the rest of them. How big of a ridge do you need? An older man asked. Since the crops were different, the ridges in the fields were also different in size. For those who had done farm work, this was something that even children knew, but for the children in the city, there were not many who knew this. If Renbachian hadn't read a lot of information these few days, he would have been dumbfounded when he heard this question. First, the 2 plots of land were divided into 5 portions. Then, the requirements for each portion were stated. Everyone expressed that they understood. After throwing all the work to them, he strolled back. No wonder so many people wanted to become officials. It felt good to throw things to others to do. When he returned, he went to look for caretaker Sher, but he saw that he was busy. Renbachian waited at the side for a while and got caretaker Sher to write a slip for him to go out. When you go out, take 2 servants with you. Don't go out by yourself. One look and I can tell that you're not from Dayo. It's easy to get into trouble if you go out by yourself, caretaker Sher warned. It's not that messy, right? Renbachian was shocked when he heard caretaker Sher's reminder. It's not chaotic. However, your arms and legs aren't big enough for me to pinch you. If anything happens to you, it will be troublesome, caretaker Sher said as he sized up Renbachian. Renbachian thought about it and felt that his physique wasn't strong enough to be pinched by someone. Just the odd job workers in the Beast Park were all tall and sturdy, and each of them could fit in 2 people. He reckoned that even if he tied up 3 to 5 of himself together, he wouldn't be able to defeat one person. Also, the chefs in the Imperial Kitchen could smash a 10-centimeter thick chopping board into pieces with a single slap. He couldn't help but be impressed by this kind of martial strength. I will definitely bring an electric baton back next time. Ren Baqian made up his mind and returned to his room with the note. This time around he brought a few books. One was Regional Anatomy, one was Systematic Anatomy, and one was Typhoid and Diseases. They were all prepared to be given to the Qin medicine shop. Anyway, there were plenty of these things on Earth. It would be good if he could teach them to others in this world and save a few more lives. Knowledge was precious, and it was even more precious in this world. However, to Ren Baqian, these things weren't important. Other than that, he also brought 1,000 vials, some syringes and catheters. This was mainly because he saw a piece of news on the internet before he came. It was about using vials to inject normal saline solution to stop the bleeding of a pregnant woman with massive postpartum hemorrhage. The success rate was almost 99%. It was easy to learn, and there were no side effects. It had always been said that giving birth was like taking a trip to the gates of hell. Massive postpartum hemorrhage had a very high mortality rate. If he could easily save countless lives, why wouldn't he do it? After that, he bought a lot of vials. He could still remember the expression on the girl's face when she looked at him in the medicine shop. He reckoned that she didn't treat him as a good person. A normal person definitely wouldn't buy so many vials at once. Other than these, he also bought alum and mirabolite, which were used to tan animal hides. The food in Dayo was mainly meat, such as cattle and sheep. There were a lot of cattle and sheep hides in the Beast Park. They were of low value and could be used to make sofas after tanning them. After sorting out the items, Ren Baqian went out and found 2 burly odd job workers. One of them was called Ting Hulu, and the other was Tai Dao. They were very diligent and straightforward, but they weren't considered smart. The 2 of them carried the items and followed behind. The 3 of them went straight to the Qin medicine shop. Not long after entering the city, Ren Baqian saw a few people fighting in front of him. There were also many people watching and cheering at the side. Your fist is too slow, did you not drink milk? Hit the chin. Hit the stomach. Sigh. You didn't even hit it, why are you so stupid? Ren Baqian passed by the side and was speechless when he heard those people shouting. These people were too hateful. However, the people of Dayo were used to it. The people who were fighting inside became even more excited when they heard the clamor around them. Before Ren Baqian could walk past the crowd, he heard someone shouting above him. There was also a commotion around him. When Ren Baqian raised his head, he saw a face getting closer and closer to him. F***. Before Ren Baqian could curse, he was pushed to the ground by someone. The person who pushed him down was a lady. She was wearing a beast skin waistcoat and her hair was tied into many small braids. At first glance, she seemed to be pretty good looking. It was just that the corners of her eyes were a little bruised as if she had been punched by someone. After the lady pushed him down, she rolled on the ground and stood up. She cursed and squeezed through the crowd again. Ren Baqian covered his face and let out a breath of cold air. Just now, that lady directly knocked into his face with her mouth. There was no romantic feeling at all. He just felt that his face was a little swollen. Caretaker Ren, are you all right? Tang Hulu and Tai Dao asked as they pulled Ren Baqian up. Ren Baqian rubbed his face and thought that this was really an unexpected disaster. He wanted to see what the lady who knocked him down looked like. However, a group of tall and strong people surrounded her like a wall. He couldn't see anything. He could only hear the clamor and the cursing from inside. Forget it, let's go, Ren Baqian said to the 2 of them while covering his face. He really couldn't get angry with this bunch of barbarians. After walking for a long distance, Ren Baqian looked at his right hand. Just now, when he was blocking the attack, he seemed to have caught something soft. It was a consolation prize. When he arrived at the Qin medicine shop, there were still many people waiting to be treated. Chapter 37. There were all kinds of herbs in the house. Once they entered, they could smell the strong smell of traditional Chinese medicine. The 3 of them put down their things. Teng Hulu and Tai Dao looked around as they had nothing to do. Ren Baqian took out the book, Typhoid and Diseases, and started reading. It was written in simplified Chinese. Chen Zixing definitely could not understand it. Rinpoche still had to explain it to him later. Hence, he wanted to familiarize himself with it in advance to save some time. After reading for a while, they suddenly heard noises coming from outside. A man was shouting, "Doctor, doctor, help! Don't panic. What's the situation?" Chen Zixing raised his head and asked. "My wife just gave birth to a son. She is bleeding nonstop. Doctor, please get me some ointment for my wounds," the man shouted. Chen Zixing frowned. He knew what was going on. If he could not find a way to stop the bleeding, the ointment would not be of much use. Hence, he said, the ointment is not very effective for postpartum hemorrhage. We have to stop the bleeding in a short period of time. I know, but how can we stop the bleeding?" The man's eyes were red. He shouted loudly, but his voice was full of helplessness. It was a common occurrence for a pregnant woman to die from postpartum hemorrhage. Every year, there would be more than 10 cases. This was due to the inconvenience of communication in modern society. Hence, when the man knew that his wife was bleeding, he immediately panicked and rushed here. Chen Zixing also frowned. Although this world was not that strict between men and women, it was impossible for him to help the pregnant woman with this. Furthermore, he did not have any good ideas. Finally, he sighed and said, "I will get you some ointment for your wounds. Go back and try it." In other words, it was up to the heavens to decide. This kind of thing happened frequently. Unfortunately, he was powerless. At this moment, someone suddenly appeared beside Chen Zixing. "I have a way to stop the bleeding." Chen Zixing was stunned when he heard this voice. He turned his head and saw that it was Rinpoche. He immediately stood up and grabbed Rinpoche's shoulder. "Really?" "Absolutely." Rinpoche nodded. He had heard the whole story when he was inside. He did not expect to encounter such a thing when he just brought these things over. It was a coincidence. However, he did not know that this was not a coincidence. This kind of thing happened frequently. "How do I stop the bleeding?" Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, the burly man's eyes lit up. He immediately grabbed Rinpoche's shoulders and lifted him up. "Let go." Tai Dao and Teng Hulu came out of the room. When they saw this scene, they immediately went forward and twisted the burly man's hands behind his back. Rinpoche also landed on the ground. I'm sorry. I was too excited. How can I stop the bleeding and save my wife?" The burly man didn't resist. He lowered his head like a child waiting to be scolded, a pleading expression on his face. "Let him go," Rinpoche said as he looked at him. "That person didn't use much strength and didn't hurt him. It was just a subconscious movement, but her strength was too great, and she directly lifted him up." "Mr. Chen, both of you follow me," Rinpoche said to them and led the way into the house. After both of them entered the house, Chen Zixing asked anxiously, "Mr. Ren, may I know how to stop the bleeding?" Rinpoche opened the bag that he brought with him. There were 1,000 condoms inside. He took out one and said to the two of them, "Use this." Chen Zixing's eyes lit up and hurriedly asked, "May I know how to do it?" Rinpoche found a basin of water at the side, then took out a catheter and a syringe to demonstrate to the two of them. This is called a condom. First, find a clean rope and tie the catheter and the condom together. Then, insert the condom and catheter into the uterus of the pregnant woman. Speaking up to this point, Rinpoche raised his head and looked at the burly man. When he saw that the burly man was at a loss, he said, "It is inserted from the birth canal to the belly, where the child is conceived." This was the first time Rinpoche explained this to someone, and he felt a little embarrassed. However, the other two were even more embarrassed than him. However, he still had to explain the method clearly. He took the syringe, drew water from the basin, and squeezed it into the catheter. After a few times, the condom swelled up and turned into a water ball. "Just do this, let the condom swell up in the belly and apply pressure to stop the bleeding," Rinpoche said as he demonstrated. "May I know how confident you are?" Chen Zixing asked. 99% confident, Rinpoche replied. "That's great, thank you so much. The burly man was overjoyed when he heard that Rinpoche was 99% confident. "Mr. Chen, the midwife will be delivering the baby, right?" You can tell the midwife about this method and let her do it. However, you must be fast. In addition, don't use ordinary water, preferably salt water. Also, you have to control the amount of water yourself. Alright then, I will make a trip there. Saving a life is like fighting a fire, and it cannot be delayed. Chen Zixing didn't say much. He took the 2 brand new condoms, catheter, and syringes from Ren Baqian and hurriedly left with the burly man. Although he wouldn't be of much help, he was afraid that the burly man would miss something and cause a life to be in danger. Therefore, he might as well make a trip there himself and inform the midwife directly. After they left, Ren Baqian sat back in his chair and continued to read Typhoid and Diseases. However, he couldn't get into it no matter how hard he tried. He only hoped that things would go smoothly. After all, it was a human life. After waiting for a long time, Chen Zixing didn't return. Ren Baqian was bored from waiting and decided to wait outside. When he came out, he saw a young man treating a patient. He reckoned that he was Chen Zixing's family member or disciple. However, looking at his height and appearance, he wasn't from Dayo. Therefore, he should be the former. Are you the one that I knocked down? Ren Baqian suddenly heard a woman's clear voice. He turned around and saw a woman who was about 1.7 meters tall. She was wearing a beast skin waistcoat with a layer of underwear underneath. Her originally pretty and heroic face was now bruised and swollen. There was even a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. Indeed, she was the one that knocked him down just now. Why, do you want to apologize? Ren Baqian asked casually. In your dreams? I haven't even said anything about you taking advantage of me just now, the woman wrinkled her nose and said. Ren Baqian was delighted. So, she still knew about it. I thought you only had fighting in your head. However, he still pointed at his bruised face. The meaning was obvious. What happened, Nagu? A burly man beside her asked. Didn't I get thrown out during the fight just now? I knocked him down. Nagu pointed at Ren Baqian and said. That burly man glanced at Ren Baqian and didn't say anything. Anyway, he wasn't from Dayo, so it didn't matter. If he was from Dayo, then it didn't matter. Dayo people were all thick-skinned. Even if they were knocked down, it wouldn't hurt at all. No one would fuss over such things. Ren Baqian guessed his thoughts and shook his head helplessly. People from Dayo and people from other countries really didn't like each other. However, Ren Baqian noticed that there were a few thumb-sized whip marks on that burly man's naked body. It looked painful just by looking at them. However, that burly man didn't seem to take it seriously. Previously, he heard from caretaker Sure that people who fought on the streets would be whipped. He didn't know if Nagu was also whipped. Ren Baqian took a glance and saw some whip marks on Nagu's exposed arm. She must have been whipped along the way. Sure enough, she didn't run away. However, seeing that her expression didn't change, Ren Baqian admired her a little. Hey, I'm sorry. Just as Ren Baqian was about to leave, Nagu said straightforwardly. Chapter 38. He waited at the entrance for a long time, watching the passers-by from the other world come and go. It was also a bit of fun. After waiting for an unknown amount of time, Chen Changsheng finally returned in a hurry. Beside him was still that burly man. Looking at his happy face, Ren Baqian knew that it was a success. Knowing that his method had saved a person, he was still a little excited, and a smile unconsciously appeared on his face. Mr. Ren, it's all thanks to you this time. Chen Zixing pulled Ren Baqian along. Brother, thank you very much. With a face full of joy, the burly man came forward and gave Ren Baqian a bear hug. Ren Baqian heard his bones creaking and almost couldn't breathe. He finally knew why it was called a bear hug. It was as if he had been hugged by a bear. His chest tightened, making it difficult for him to even breathe. With Chen Zixing's help, Ren Baqian finally struggled free from the man's embrace and gasped for breath for a long time. The man did not even realize that he had almost killed his savior. Ren Baqian really wanted to give him a few kicks. I don't have anything good, but this knife is the most valuable thing I have on me. I'll give it to you. The big man took out a half-meter-long knife from his waist and put it in his hand. I don't need this. You can take it back. I'm already very happy to be able to save him. Rinpoche quickly declined. How can we Dayo people do such ungrateful things? You saved my wife's life. As long as I can take it out, you can take whatever you want. However, this saber is the most valuable thing I have. I will give it to you as a token of my gratitude, the burly man said to Rinpoche with a serious face. He couldn't hide the joy on his face. Mr. Rin, please accept it. If you accept it, he won't feel at ease. Qin Zixing laughed. Here you go. I'm going back to see my son. After saying that, the man turned around and left happily. Dayo people are all like this. Mr. Rin, you just have to get used to it. Qin Zixing smiled at Rinpoche as he looked at the back view of the burly man. Rinpoche looked at the dagger in his hand. It had an animal skin scabbard, and the hilt was also wrapped in animal skin. It wasn't light either, weighing at least 5 to 6 caddies. Previously, he heard from Caretaker Sure that Dayo's ironware was still very valuable. An ordinary family wouldn't be able to afford such a saber even if they didn't eat or drink for a few months. But he really had no use for this thing. Metal weapons were expensive in Dayo, but they could be found everywhere on Earth. Rinpoche shook his head helplessly when he saw that the burly man had already disappeared into the crowd. He carried the dagger and went in with Qin Zixing. As soon as Qin Zixing came back, everyone stood up and greeted him. Dr. Qin, Dr. Qin, greeted the doctor. This indirectly proved that Qin Zixing's popularity here was indeed very high. Although the people of Dayo didn't like foreigners, people like Qin Zixing were respected wherever they went. What the people of Dayo hated was the greed of foreign merchants and the haughty attitude of many people who came to Dayo and regarded them as barbarians. When they reached the patient's table, Qin Zixing pointed to the wall next to him. There was a wooden sign with some words on it. Rinpoche had seen this sign a long time ago, but he didn't know what was written on it. When Rinpoche saw Qin Zixing pointing at the sign, he asked, "What's written on it?" "It's strictly forbidden to hug a doctor," Qin Zixing said in a low voice. Rinpoche. It seemed that being too loved was also risking one's life. According to Rinpoche's knowledge, there weren't many people in Dayo who were literate. It wasn't easy for Dr. Qin to survive until now. The two of them entered the inner room and their eyes were fixed on the things that Rinpoche was holding. "What do I have here that you want?" Qin Zixing asked straightforwardly. Not only could this thing save lives, it was also extremely effective. "The formula and ingredients for the black mud cream," Rinpoche said. Qin Zixing hesitated for a moment. The penicillin that Rinpoche mentioned previously was something that he really wanted. Furthermore, according to the description, it could save even more people. It was just that it was a common occurrence for pregnant women to die from postpartum hemorrhage. Every time he encountered such a situation, he would feel very regretful as he watched young lives wither away. Most of them were only in their teens, which made him feel even more regretful. "I just want the formula and ingredients for the black mud cream. Just like what I said previously, I will teach you how to make penicillin. As for these things, I will give them to you. They are more meaningful in your hands than in mine. However, I suggest that you distribute these things to the midwives and teach them how to use it, in case it is too late," Rinpoche said. Qin Zixing turned to look at Rinpoche, tidied up his clothes, and bowed respectfully. "I thank you on behalf of them," Qin Zixing said sincerely. "It's nothing, these things aren't very useful in my hands." Rinpoche shook his head. He bought a total of 100 boxes, which was about 2,000 yuan. Including the syringes and catheters, it was just a few hundred yuan more. This amount of money couldn't do much on Earth, and he wasn't short of money now. However, in Dayo, it could save countless lives. After using these things, if you want to use them again, you must disinfect them after boiling the water. You can also use other things as replacements, such as fish bladders or animal bladders. You can study what is more suitable, Rinpoche exhorted. "We will. I will spread this method and let all the midwives know. This is a way to save lives, and we should let more people know about it," Qin Zixing nodded and said solemnly. Rinpoche smiled. This Qin Zixing was indeed a good person. "All right, a lot of time has passed today. I will teach you the production and extraction method of penicillin, Rinpoche said. After waiting for Qin Zixing to take out the few moldy fruits, Rinpoche taught him how to make the culture fluid and how to filter it. Most of the procedures were just explained and he didn't really do it. If he really did it, there wouldn't be enough time. Furthermore, some things were lacking. For example, rice and vinegar could be bought. As for seaweed or alkaline water, Qin Zixing had to figure out how to do it himself. Qin Zixing took a pen and paper to record and occasionally asked a few questions. By the time he finished explaining everything, it was already nighttime. Rinpoche exhorted, remember, when using penicillin, a small number of people will develop allergies. If this happens, it's best to stop using it. Qin Zixing put down the pen and paper. After writing for an entire afternoon, he was extremely tired. After listening to Rinpoche's words, he nodded to show that he understood. The same disease would have different effects when used by different people. This was something that he knew very well. During this period, Rinpoche took a look at the things that Qin Zixing had written down and didn't recognize a few of them. However, he could tell that the handwriting looked like it was made by a chicken's claw. Who said that doctors have good handwriting? Rinpoche immediately had this thought. These are the basics. Rinpoche passed the other books to Qin Zixing. Of these 3 books, one is Typhoid and Diseases, and the other 2 are about anatomy. They are a different kind of medical theory and are different from your medical skills. They don't talk about looking, listening, asking, and feeling the pulse. They specialize in studying the structure of the human body. You can also refer to them. However, I don't think you can understand the words. I don't have time today. I will translate them for you when I'm free. Qin Zixing took the books carefully. He knew the value of books, especially those that hadn't appeared in the world. Perhaps one of the books could solve some of the problems that had been troubling him. Its value was immeasurable. After flipping through it, he realized that Typhoid and Diseases was basically filled with words and he couldn't understand it. The other 2 books were about the structure of the human body and had many anatomical drawings. Qin Zixing flipped through them and asked, how did they study it? How can the drawings be so similar? They probably used corpses to study it, Rinpoche replied with uncertainty. He didn't know much about the development of Western medicine. No matter how they studied it, knowledge is always correct. That's true. Qin Zixing nodded. Chapter 39. Wait a minute, Mr. Ren. This is the formula for the black mud cream that you wanted. These are the seeds. Additionally, you will need a few things from wild beasts. Caretaker Ren, you can prepare these yourself. Aren't you afraid that I lied to you about penicillin? Rinpoche asked with a smile. Given Mr. Ren's breadth of mind, I'm sure you won't have high hopes for me. Qin Zixing said with a serious expression, let's not talk about other things. Just this method of saving people today will save many people in the future. Thank you very much. Rinpoche took the list with a smile on his face. It felt good to be trusted by others. He lowered his head and glanced at the paper. He didn't understand a single word. Mr. Qin, tell me and I'll write it down, Rinpoche said helplessly. He asked someone to find a piece of charcoal and sharpen it into a pen. Then he listened to Qin Zixing's instructions and wrote on a piece of paper. Qin Zixing had even prepared seeds for him. It was still all right at the front. However, towards the end, Rinpoche was a little confused. There was a 6-horned dragon that was dried and ground into powder. Rinpoche's mind was filled with question marks. What was a 6-horned dragon? It couldn't be a real dragon, right? Rinpoche knew about grinding earth dragons into powder. Earth dragons are earthworms, right? He just didn't know if the earthworms in this world were any different from those on Earth. But it shouldn't be hard to obtain. At most, he could bring some back for others to raise. The last one was the green toad's saliva. Nothing else. Rinpoche raised his head and asked, No, that's all. Mr. Qin, do you have any replacements? Rinpoche asked. Qin Zixing stroked his beard. Which one needs to be replaced? Rinpoche used his finger to stroke the 6-horned dragon and green toad. Apart from the earth dragon, Are there any replacements for the other two? These things aren't hard to find. It's just that the medicinal herbs take a long time to grow and the survival rate isn't high. Also, it's a little troublesome to concoct. Chen Zixing was puzzled. Rinpoche felt that it would be better to ask for two alternatives. He didn't know how the creatures in this world were different from those on Earth. Having more alternatives would allow him to have more choices in the future. I can replace it, but the efficacy will be greatly reduced, Chen Zixing said. It doesn't matter, Rinpoche said. There was no need to worry about the effects of the medicine decreasing. An injury that would normally take 10 days to half a month to heal could be healed in just a few minutes with the black mud cream. The effects of the medicine would be reduced by several times. Even if it lasted for a few hours, a day, or even 2 days, it would still be acceptable. Chen Zixing mentioned 2 more ingredients, and Rinpoche wrote them down. Then, he carefully kept the paper in his pocket. I see that your writing is similar to the writing in the books you gave me. I've never seen it before. May I know where Mr. Ren is from? Chen Zixing asked curiously. He had been holding back this question for a long time, and only now did he ask it. China. You definitely haven't heard of it, Rinpoche replied casually. Chen Zixing pondered for a moment. There was indeed no country called China in his memory. Mr. Chen, do you have earth dragons, six-horned dragons, and green toads? Rinpoche asked. Since the black mud cream was made by the Chen family medicine shop, it was very likely that there were ready-made materials here. There are indeed some. What Chen Zixing said was exactly what Rinpoche thought. Chen Zixing then led them to the backyard. Just as Rinpoche thought, the earth dragon was an earthworm. Chen Zixing had dried them, so there was no need for Rinpoche to bring them back. He would first go back and see if the earthworms on Earth could work. As for the six-horned dragon, it was kept in a jar filled with water. It was golden in color, had 6 small horns on its head, 4 limbs, and a tail. It seemed to be an amphibious creature. Rinpoche looked at it for a long time and felt that it looked like a salamander, but he wasn't sure. The green toad was the size of 2 palms, and its body was rather huge. Its back was full of bulging dots. When Rinpoche heard its name, he thought it would be green in color, but it was actually brown. According to Chen Zixing, this thing was green before it matured, and it would only turn brown after it matured. Can you give me this 6-horned dragon and green toad? Rinpoche asked. Chen Zixing stroked his beard and said, This is a small matter. However, Mr. Ren, you have to take note that if you touch the green toad with your skin, you will get a rash that is painful and itchy. If you want to cure it, you can only apply the juice of the 9-wood flower to the rash. Otherwise, you will have to wait for a month for it to slowly fade. If you want to extract its saliva, you just need to smear honey on a wooden stick and lick it clean. Understood, thank you. Rinpoche was delighted. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. He had already obtained the formula and ingredients for the black mud cream. He just needed to bring it back to Earth and hand it over to Qin. After that, it would depend on their research. Alright, it's getting late, I still have to go back. I will teach you some other day. You can try the production method of penicillin and verify its effects. The earlier this thing is produced, the more people can be saved. Rinpoche asked the 2 of them to carry the jar and asked for some 9-wood flowers. After asking them what they ate, he stood up and bade them farewell. Mr. Ren is kind, I admire you very much, Chen Zixing said. I just want to save as many as I can. Human life is precious, Rinpoche said. However, he didn't notice the looks of admiration on Teng Hulu and Tai Dao's faces. They had witnessed everything that happened today from start to finish, and naturally knew the cause and effect. Not to mention other things, Rinpoche's act of teaching others his skills just to save a few strangers made them admire him from the bottom of their hearts. On the way back, Teng Hulu and Tai Dao looked at each other with the jar in their hands and shouted, Caretaker Ren. What's the matter? Rinpoche was in a good mood. He had obtained the formula for the black gypsum and also saved someone. For an ordinary person, saving someone seemed to be very far away from him. He felt happy from the bottom of his heart when he thought that another person's life was saved and a family was saved. In the future, if you need anything, just let us know. We will definitely do it well, Tai Dao said. Just because of what happened at the medicine store today? Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at the two of them. We are not good with words, but Caretaker Ren is a capable person who cares about the lives of strangers. We are willing to work for someone like Caretaker Ren. Tai Dao nodded and continued. Yes, Caretaker Ren is a good person, Ting Hulu echoed. That's good, Rinpoche said happily and patted their shoulders. As for the specifics, he would see in the future. On the way back, Rinpoche looked at the dagger in his hand and thought to himself, could all the daggers in this world be divine weapons? Perhaps the dagger that person gave him could cut through iron like mud? Thinking of this, he pulled out the dagger. The blade was black, half a finger thick, and there were some rust stains on it. No matter how he looked at it, it did not look like a divine weapon at all. Holding on to his last glimmer of hope, he slashed at a tree by the roadside. The tree was not cut into two as he expected. There was only a scar on it. Immediately, he knew that he was thinking too much. Other than being thicker and blacker, it was not much different from a kitchen knife that cost $10 on Earth. Fairy tales were indeed all lies. The few of them returned to the Beast Park and the kitchen was already empty. Teng Hulu and Tai Dao sent the jar back to Rinpoche's house. Rinpoche went to pull the cook out of bed and said, "Come, I'll give you something good." "What is it?" The cook followed Rinpoche out of the house with a blank look on his face. "Go to the kitchen and prepare some meat first. I'll go get something." Rinpoche patted the cook's back and went straight to the room to get some spices. When he reached the kitchen, he put it on the table. "Look, it's good stuff. Are these the spices that Caretaker Rin uses in the Imperial kitchen?" The cook opened the small bag and was pleasantly surprised when he saw what was inside. "Oh, you're quite well informed." Rinpoche patted the cook's back and said, "Hey, I have a brother who works in the Imperial kitchen. Today, he even asked me about you." The cook touched the back of his head and gave a simple and honest smile. "Yes, I'll tell you how to use these spices. This seasoning is for stewing, this cumin is for roasting meat, this pepper is for..." After Rinpoche told him how to use them, he reminded him, "Use them sparingly. It will take a long time for us to grow them ourselves. These things will be gone after we use them up." "Grow them ourselves?" The cook immediately lost his voice. "Of course, these things are not for sale. If we don't grow them ourselves, where are we going to get them?" Rinpoche said. "However, other than the ones that are used by the Imperial kitchen and you, the rest will all be mine. I still need to sell them for money." "Hee hee hee hee." The cook laughed foolishly. As long as he was given some to use, nothing else mattered. After Rinpoche finished speaking, he said to Ting Hulu and Tai Dao, "Did you hear that? I got those 2 plots of land to plant spices. The 2 of you can help keep an eye on them and make them eat more. Caretaker Ren, don't worry. Even if Caretaker Ren didn't remind us, we wouldn't slack off." The 2 of them patted their chests and said. Rinpoche believed this. Over the past few days, he hadn't seen a single crafty person. He had to admit that the people of Dayo were indeed honest and capable. After waiting for half an hour, the meat in the pot was still not ready, but the aroma of the meat assailed their nostrils. The smell made them even hungrier. "Caretakerin, you are here? I haven't seen you for a whole day," Caretaker Sure said as he walked in. "I was delayed outside." "Caretaker Sure, what is this?" "Come and get something to eat." "What are you stewing? Why does it smell so good? I can smell it from afar." Caretaker Sure's eyes were fixated on the steaming pot. Rinpoche laughed. Caretaker Sure was actually here to look for food. "You are just in time." The few of them anxiously looked at the cooked meat in the pot. Each of them took a bowl and smelled the aroma. They didn't wait for the meat to get cold before stuffing it into their mouths. Every one of them cried out from the scalding heat and snatched the meat while it was still scalding. Seeing them like this, Rinpoche's appetite increased. He felt that the meat today was especially fragrant. After the few of them finished their meal, Rinpoche sat at the entrance and chatted with Caretaker Sure. Rinpoche was impressed when he saw Caretaker Sure holding a bowl of meat soup and occasionally spitting out mouthfuls of it. In this meal just now, the few of them ate at least one. 5 kilograms of meat each. The few of them only ate a huge hind leg. No wonder the people of Dayo have such good physiques. Indeed, good physiques are supported by a good appetite. Chapter 40. The next morning, Rinpoche prepared some bamboo leaves and water for Tian Tian and Gun Gun. Then, he brought them to a piece of flat land not far from the kitchen to look for leather. In a large open space, there were poles with ropes in the middle. All kinds of furs were hung on the poles, and after some simple cleaning, they were hung there to dry. There were cowhide and sheepskin. There were about 100 odd job workers and family members in the beast park. Based on the appetite of the people of Dayo, the amount of meat they ate every day was quite large. At the very least, they had to kill 3 cows and a sheep. This was under the circumstance that the sheep in this world were bigger than the horses in Dayo's previous world. Every day, after killing them, they would simply wash their skins and dry them. Then, they would fold them into bundles and store them in the storeroom. Once they had accumulated a certain amount, they would sell them to buy alcohol. This kind of fur, which had only gone through the simplest treatment, was of very low value, so no one cared about it. Some of them were the skins of the dead animals in the beast park. Rinpoche even saw the skin of a saber-toothed tiger. There were black stripes on the yellow fur, which were much larger and denser than the stripes on a tiger. It looked more like the skin of a leopard, but the patterns on it were much larger and not circular. It was said that 2 saber-toothed tigers fought yesterday and one was bitten to death. The furs that were being dried here were all in good condition. Rinpoche covered his nose and looked at them. Then he got someone to roll up all the dried furs and carry them away. Although it had been cleaned, it still emitted an extremely heavy stench, attracting many flies and other vermin to fly around. Remove the oil film and flesh from the surface first. Rinpoche instructed as he pulled Tai Dao and Ting Hulu over. Of the 10 servants under him, 3 were in the ice cellar, 5 were in the pear field, and only 2 were here. He spent the whole morning cleaning out some leather, then soaking it in water for another 2 days before it could be used. Rinpoche tied up the rest and threw them to the side. Then he brought the 2 of them to Baishur district to look for a blacksmith to forge the fan according to the pattern. Rinpoche had considered going out by himself. However, after thinking about it, the Dayo people didn't treat outsiders very well. Furthermore, Dayo's combat power was much stronger than his. If anything were to happen, it would be too late for him to cry. In the end, he could only wait for the 2 of them and only went out after noon. When he arrived at Baishur district, he saw the same shop owner as last time. He showed the fan to him. This can be done, right? Some parts can be replaced, such as the fan blades and the base. They can be made of metal or wood. What is this? The shop owner looked at the fan with a puzzled expression. He had never seen anything like this before. Rinpoche aimed the fan at the store owner and pulled the rope all the way to the end. The blades of the fan spun, sweeping up a gust of wind toward the shop. After the rope was straightened and released, the fan blades began to rotate in the opposite direction. Feeling the wind blowing against his face, the blacksmith shop owner's eyes lit up. This thing is interesting. After receiving the fan, the owner pulled the rope behind it, and the fan blades began to spin. Then, he let go and turned in the opposite direction. Then he turned the fan to his face, pulled the cord, and let go. Pull the rope. Let go. Pull the rope. For a moment, she was having so much fun that she forgot about Rinpoche and the rest. Rinpoche saw that the shopkeeper was having fun. After waiting for a while, he had no choice but to interrupt him. How is it? Can you do it? The shopkeeper suddenly reacted. Then we'll have to take it apart to see the structure inside. Is that okay? Yes. The lid at the back will open as soon as I lift it. The shop owner opened the back cover according to Rinpoche's instructions. The internal structure was very simple. There were only bearings, rubber rings, and ropes. At first glance, it looked very simple. However, the shopkeeper frowned and asked, "Where did you make this?" "What's wrong?" Rinpoche asked. "We can't reach this level. This is too perfect. The thickness of every part is the same. I really don't know how it was made." The shopkeeper pointed at the bearings inside and said to Renbachien. Renbachien finally understood. The bearings made in the modern era were naturally not comparable to the ones made by these craftsmen. It's fine as long as it doesn't affect the usage. However, it must be smooth. Otherwise, it will affect the strength of pulling the rope and there will be noise, Renbachien said. The shopkeeper touched his chin and said, "That can be done. We don't have this thing here." The shopkeeper pointed at something inside and said. Renbachien took a look and saw that it was a rubber ring. This thing could be made with animal tendons, but there was no need to tell the shopkeeper. After the first one is done, I'll check it. If it's up to standard, I'll need another 20. We might need more in the future. However, within 3 months, you can't leak this thing out and you can't let anyone else make it, Renbachien exhorted. Initially, he wanted to set a longer time limit. However, he thought that this kind of earthen fan was easy to make and others could easily understand it. Even if he restricted the shopkeeper from making it for others, as long as others bought one, they could easily find a blacksmith shop to replicate it. Therefore, I might as well limit it to 3 months. As long as the first batch of my goods appears in the market, I'll be able to make a sum of money. 3 months isn't long. However, you have to make at least another 20, the shopkeeper said. As long as you can make it up to standard. If you can't make it up to standard, no one will ask you to make this thing, right? Renbachien said. Don't look down on my skills. Although I can't reach this level, I can definitely be smooth. The shopkeeper patted his chest and said. That sound was so loud that Renbachien felt like his internal organs were going to come out. Can you leave this thing here for me to study? The shopkeeper asked again. He kept fiddling with the fan. Renbachien didn't know if he liked the fan or the bearings inside. Sure. How long will it take for you to make it? Renbachien asked. This thing can be collected the day after tomorrow, the shopkeeper said. Renbachien calculated that he should be returning to Earth the day after tomorrow. I will give you 1 more day, 3 days later. Renbachien left the fan with Teng Hulu and Tai Dao. He returned to the beast park and continued to clean the fur. In the afternoon, Renbachien was called to the palace and brought to the imperial kitchen. Brother Ren. Upon seeing Renbachien, Caretaker Go's facial expression twitched for a long time. Finally, he lowered his head and called him brother. Renbachien liked the character of Dayo people. As long as he said it, he would definitely do it. Even if he was unwilling, he would still do it. Furthermore, Renbachien felt extremely comfortable when he saw a burly man lowering his head and calling him brother. The other people in the imperial kitchen greeted him with much more sincerity. After all, the condiments that Renbachien brought were an eye-opener for them. They could proudly say that at least the items in Dayo's imperial kitchen were the most complete in the world. The imperial kitchen in the Lianyun kingdom couldn't be compared to the imperial kitchen in the Great Xia Palace. Brother Ren, what are you cooking today? One of the people in the imperial kitchen asked. At first, it was a little awkward to call him Brother Ren. However, after a few times, he got used to it. Renbachien was from the northeast. Naturally, he was most familiar with northeast cuisine. Chapter 41. Although it was called stewed chicken with mushrooms, it was just a kind of stewed chicken with mushrooms. However, the taste was much better than that of ordinary chicken. Even before it was taken out of the pot, its fragrance had already assailed the nostrils, causing everyone in the imperial kitchen to salivate. The double-cooked pork was made with the meat of an animal called inzhong. The meat was very similar to pork. The braised pork he made last time was also made with this kind of animal. There were a lot of cows in Dayo, mainly water buffaloes. There were a lot of them in the plains and lowland jungles. Many of them were farmed as well, and they were the main type of food in Dayo. After stewing the dish, Renbachien found a place to sit. A few chefs from the imperial kitchen ran over to ask him about the details of the cooking process, such as how to add the seasonings. Renbachien arrived one by one. Brother Ren, the manager said that you should deliver the dishes for today, a chef said to Renbachien after the dishes were served. Oh. Renbachien raised his head and looked for Caretaker Go. Normally, Caretaker Go was the one who sent the gifts. His Majesty asked you to deliver it after you're done cooking, the chef explained. Only then did Rinpoche nod his head. He carefully carried a metal plate with a few plates of cooked dishes and rice on it and covered it with a lid. He carefully carried it out and saw a soldier standing guard outside. They followed him all the way to the palace. When the dishes were sent into the palace, someone took them to the side to test for poison and then brought them to His Majesty. On the other hand, Rinpoche waited at the bottom of the steps. Continue with that story of yours. The Empress got up from the couch. After she finished speaking, she began to taste the dishes for the day. Just as Rinpoche had expected, other than steamed pork in double scoop, the Empress also had a preference for pine nuts and peas. Although she was an emperor, she was still a woman. She had a preference for sweet dishes. Rinpoche thought about the content of the previous lecture. It was about the battle between Sun Bofu and Yen Baihu. Next, it was about Lu Xianfeng shooting halberds at the Yuan Gate. The Empress didn't listen much and said, "It's only 150 steps, why are you making such a fuss?" There was no lack of hunters in Dayo who were able to hit their targets. Previously, when I heard you speak of it, I was thinking, you are so weak, yet your country was not destroyed. Rinpoche was left speechless by the Empress's words. The difference in strength between the people on Earth and this world was too great. There was no way to compare them. He would send people flying with a kick at the slightest provocation, and even the stone wall would have a hole in it. How could a person get up and fight again unscathed? This seemed to be very common in Dayo. On Earth, this kick would have killed him. Not to mention tearing down a city gate with his bare hands. Perhaps only Li Yuanba from the romance of the Sui and Tang dynasties could try. After talking about the three kingdoms for 4 to 6 hours, Rinpoche finally withdrew. After Rinpoche left, the Empress picked up a piece of paper beside her and looked at it again. Everything that happened to Rinpoche at the Chen family's medicine shop was clearly written on it. "He's rather kind-hearted," the Empress said faintly. "However, this method of his can be carried out first." However, there was another thing in the report that the Empress was very concerned about. It was the 3 books that Rinpoche took out. When Rinpoche arrived, he was clean and had nothing on him. For him to be able to take out 3 books now, it probably had something to do with him disappearing every few days. Although he didn't know where he went, it was probably related to the situation at that time. Appearing out of thin air and disappearing out of thin air, leaving no trace behind. This kind of thing made her puzzled, but she could explore it later. She was more concerned about another point. Although Dayo respected martial arts, as an empress, she couldn't be so short-sighted. She had studied Great Xia and the Yun nation before. Naturally, she knew the role of scholars, craftsmen, culture, and technology. Furthermore, Dayo's predicament had always been there. Almost all the technical content was brought in by merchants. Several generations of emperors had always wanted to send people out to learn, but the results were very little. Rinpoche had once taught the method of making ice to the Beast Park's manager and taught the method of stopping postpartum hemorrhage to the people at the Chen family's medicine shop just to save a few more people. This showed that not only was Rinpoche capable, but he wasn't like the other countries that sealed off all kinds of technology and knowledge from Dayo. This allowed her to see the possibility of obtaining all kinds of knowledge and technology from Rinpoche. If he was the kind of person with evil intentions, she could use other methods to make him spit out everything he knew. However, from the way Rinpoche handled things, he could be considered as kind-hearted. Furthermore, he wasn't stingy when it came to passing on things that he knew to others. This made her feel that he could be used. What Dayo currently lacked the most was people like him. Naturally, Rinpoche didn't know what the Empress was thinking. The next morning, he brought Teng Hulu and Tai Dao to continue cleaning the leather. Rinpoche watched as the two of them used a knife to scrape off the minced meat and oil film on the leather. Their movements were extremely swift, and every time the knife landed, a piece of oil film would fly off. Seeing that it was scorching hot, Rinpoche went forward to give it a try. He extended his hand to Tai Dao and said, "Let me try." Tai Dao passed the knife to Rinpoche with a simple and honest look on his face. One cut, Rinpoche cut a hole in the cowhide with one cut. Renbachyan thought for a while and decided not to spoil things. He returned the knife to Tai Dao and went to play with Gun Gun and Tian Tian at one side. Gun Gun and Tian Tian spent most of the day eating and sleeping. Occasionally, when they woke up, they would play like two balls. Their actions made people howl. The people in the Beast Park shook their heads when they saw Renbachyan raising these two little things. They couldn't eat and couldn't hunt. They ate every day and were extremely stupid. They really couldn't understand why caretaker Ren liked to raise these things. However, Renbachyan didn't care at all. These were pandas. On Earth, if you wanted to see them, you had to stay far away. At most, you could take a photo with your phone. You didn't even have the chance to get close to them, let alone raise two of them as pets. Renbachyan sat on the stone slab in front of the door and looked at the two little fellows crawling around on his knees. He was extremely happy. He thought to himself that he should bring his phone next time and take a few photos of these two little fellows to post on the internet. At night, Renbachyan went to the palace again. This time, he made twice-cooked pork, double-cooked pork, and pine nuts with peas. The previous dish, double-cooked pork, was the Empress's favorite. She finished half a plate of it by herself. This time, the Empress asked for it by name. Renbachyan had to admit that the Empress was much more thrifty than the ancient emperors. She only had 4 dishes for a meal, which couldn't even be compared to some of the village officials. Of course, this was also related to the fact that Dayo wasn't very rich. The Empress also didn't have any extravagant habits. When talking about Cao Cao's discussion about heroes, the Empress said, "This Cao Cao was indeed a character. Unfortunately, he was too weak." Renbachyan thought for a long time and felt that the Empress was definitely referring to Cao Cao's individual strength. Regardless of whether it was Lu Bu or the other valiant generals, the Empress was somewhat dismissive. According to the Empress, the description of those valiant generals in the book was something that even the commoners in Dayo could do. Yet, they could actually become valiant generals. This showed how weak these people were. This made Renbachyan speechless. The individual strength of these people on Earth was indeed inferior to that of Dayo. However, he was actually despised. This was too embarrassing for the people on Earth. He pondered in his heart. After talking about the 3 kingdoms, he wouldn't talk about the romance of Sui and Tang anymore. Next time, he would talk about journey to the west and investiture of the gods. Chapter 42. At night, Renbachyan returned to his house in the Beast Park. He carried the 2 jars containing the 6-horned dragon and the green toad respectively. He stuffed the formula and seeds of the black mud cream in front of his chest and fell into a deep sleep. He didn't know when he fell asleep, but he subconsciously turned over and almost knocked the jar upside down, waking him up with a start. He opened his eyes. Although it was dark around him, he could still tell that he had returned to his bedroom in China. He moved the 2 jars to one side, switched on the lights, and opened the mesh cover. He was relieved to see that the 2 fellows were still alive and kicking inside. He covered the lid again and looked at the time. It was not yet 4 o'clock. Since he couldn't sleep, he went to the living room to watch a movie on the television. When he wanted to go out for breakfast in the morning, he realized that it was a little cold outside. He looked at the date and realized that he had been to the other world 5 times. Each time, he was there for 9 days. Adding the 3 days on Earth, it was a total of 12 days. These 5 times meant that he had been there for 2 months. It was already September. He went back to the house and found a jacket that he used to wear. It was a little tight on his body, and it seemed that he had put on weight recently. He looked at himself in the mirror. His face didn't seem to have put on much weight, but his body shape was indeed more shapely than before. He went out for breakfast before calling Chin Ching. These few days, Chin Ching had called him twice, but as usual, no one picked up. Other than him, there was another call from Chin Bing. "You rascal, you have been missing for such a long time again. Your whereabouts are getting more and more unpredictable." Chin Ching ranted for a long time after picking up the call. "I have the formula for the black mud cream," Renbachyan said plainly. Where are you?" Chin Ching didn't have time to complain to Renbachyan and immediately asked, "I will send it to your father's company in a while. Speaking of which, Has the research on the black mud cream been organized? I don't know the specifics. I didn't ask much. However, it seems that the core personnel are still lacking. It should be done soon. Once your formula is here, I reckon that we can start. All right, I will be there in a while. Renbachian hung up the phone and went back to move everything into the car. He drove to a foreign trade shop to buy some casual clothes before heading to Qin Qing's father's company. When Qin Qing saw him alight from the car, he went over and gave him a bear hug. Following which, he asked doubtfully, "Have you been putting on some weight recently? You've become much stronger." Renbachian smiled and said, "You've put on some weight." Looking at Qin Qing, he was still the same. Nothing had changed. Renbachian joked, "You and Jiang Nan are about to get engaged, so stop wandering around. Be careful that you need to take medicine in the future." "Don't worry, I've been paying attention. I've been taking the medicine prescribed by an old Chinese doctor for more than half a year," Qin Qing said with a laugh. Renbachian couldn't help but give a thumbs up. "You're indeed far-sighted. You brought everything? Let's go up." Qin Qing pulled Renbachian along. "Wait, he's still in the car." Renbachian turned around and took out a box filled with waste paper from the trunk. He took out 2 cans from the box and stuffed one of them into Qin Qing's hands. "Take it, be careful." "What is this?" Qin Qing asked curiously. Renbachian carried one himself, and the 2 of them stepped into the building. Qin Qing's father was waiting for the 2 of them in his office. Other than him, there was also a middle-aged couple. "Uncle Qin." Renbachian nodded and greeted him as he entered. "Yes, Bachian is here. Let me introduce you. This is Professor Sun Qing and this is Professor Su Shan. Both of them are experts in the field of medicine. Both of them heard about the effects of the black mud cream and were very interested in it. That's why they came back from overseas." "Hello." Renbachian nodded at the 2 of them. Su Shan returned a smile, but Guqing seemed to be thinking about something. It was as if she didn't hear what Qin Qing's father said and didn't see Renbachian. Renbachian didn't feel that he was being left out. He heard that many researchers were eccentric and didn't know the ways of the world. This Sun Qing might be one of those people. Renbachian and Qin Qing placed the cans on the table. "What's this?" Qin Qing's father asked. "2 of the ingredients, the formula and the seeds, I've brought them with me." Renbachian took out the formula and placed it on the table. Qin Qing took a glance at it and exclaimed softly, "What are these? Qingyang grass? Harpy? What a weird name." Hearing Qin Qing's words, Su Shan walked over and asked, "Can I take a look?" Renbachian glanced at Qin Qing's father. Qin Qing's father nodded. "Sure, the contract has been signed and there's nothing to hide. I'll hand it over to you sooner or later." Su Shan picked up the formula and looked at it. She had a puzzled look on her face. "What are these?" Renbachian naturally knew what was written on the formula, but he didn't know what was written on it. If Renbachian didn't bring the real thing back, there would be no difference between this formula and not having it. Renbachian took out a paper bag from his pocket. There were 6 or 7 small bags in it, and all of them had words written on them. It should be a different name, just like how there are so many names for pigs. "I've brought the seeds back, we'll know when we plant them." The rest of them agreed with Renbachian's explanation. They compared the words and the formula on the paper bag one by one. All the plants matched. The remaining 3 were related to animals. "This earth dragon is an earthworm, right?" Su Shan raised her head and looked at Renbachian. "Yes." "The other 2 are in this jar," Renbachian said. "Hexagonal dragon, it should be an amblystoma. Many of them are raised for ornamental purposes. Why is it in the formula? Furthermore, this kind of creature is mainly found in Mexico. It shouldn't have existed in the past. It seems like this formula hasn't been around for a long time. However, why did the person who wrote this formula keep it in his hands all this time? I've never heard of it before. If it was said that the ancient formula was just discovered and sorted out by someone, then it was very likely that everyone knew about it. However, if it was developed in the past few decades, why didn't anyone know about it? This was rather strange. Take a look at this hexagonal dragon. Is it what you said it is?" Renbachien opened the jar first. Without waiting for Su Shan to speak, Qin Qing spoke first. Isn't this the hexagonal dragon raised at home? It's for ornamental purposes, but it can actually be used to make medicine? Yes, it is. Su Shan confirmed. Renbachien thought for a while and said, the hexagonal dragon is used as a substitute. In the past, it was an animal called Pink Yuan. Later on, it was discovered that the hexagonal dragon was more effective. Hence, it was used as the main ingredient. Look at the back of the formula. Pink Yuan, this is the previous formula. Renbachien immediately swapped the original and substitute ingredients. Anyway, he didn't write which was the original ingredient and which was the substitute. Su Shan saw that it was indeed Pink Yuan and felt relieved. The recovery ability of the hexagonal dragon is very strong, and so is the earth dragon. It is indeed possible to make use of this special effect to make medicine. Su Shan was deep in thought. In that case, we are still missing a green toad. What is it? Renbachien opened the lid of the largest jar. The few of them peeked their heads over and saw a brown frog that was the size of 2 palms. It looked like a toad. However, its size was a little too big. This is a green toad? Yes, but you must be careful. This thing is very rare and is almost extinct. It wasn't easy to get this one. This kind of green toad likes to eat honey. Dip a wooden stick in the honey and it will lick it to get its saliva. In addition, you must be careful. It is very poisonous. How poisonous? Among the frog species, the most poisonous frogs are brightly colored. Although this one is slightly bigger, it doesn't look like it is very poisonous. Sun Qing walked over and said, generally speaking, with the exception of a few, most poisonous creatures will also make themselves very bright to warn their natural enemies. See? I am very dangerous. Only weak creatures will form a protective color that is similar to the color of the surrounding environment. This is the choice of evolution for thousands of years. As Sun Qing explained to the few of them, he put his hand into the jar. He seemed to be very confident in his knowledge. Obviously, in his knowledge, there were no such highly poisonous frogs like the ones in the jar. This kind of green toad is really poisonous, Renbachien warned. Don't worry. Even if it is really poisonous, as long as there are no wounds on your hands, it will be fine. As Sun Qing spoke, he put his hand into the jar and touched the back of the green toad. Immediately, the green toad moved restlessly in the jar and let out a gurgle sound. The sound was dull and a little like the roar of thunder. Renbachien looked at Sun Qing's actions and didn't continue to speak. Well, you are a senior intellectual. You are a PhD. You have the final say. Chapter 43. Sun Qing touched the back of the green toad with his fingers before taking out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiping his hands. The poison of toads isn't strong, and it's fine to touch it with your hands. As long as you don't put it in your eyes or eat it, you'll be fine, Sun Qing continued. Ah, I see, Renbachien said. He was trying to hold back his laughter, but he put on a serious face and said, at that time, they told me that this kind of green toad is very poisonous and it would cause unbearable pain and itchiness. I have been very careful these few days. There are a few types of frogs that are very poisonous, but this one doesn't belong to them. Sun Qing nodded. He wasn't sure if the poison had started to react, but before he finished his sentence, he felt that his fingers were a little itchy. I'm going to wash my hands, Sun Qing said and went straight to the washroom. There was a washroom in Papa Chen's office. Sun Qing went in for a minute and came out with a strange look on his face. It seemed like he was trying to endure something. I'm sorry, this is called green toad, right? Although it doesn't belong to the few types of highly poisonous frogs that I know of, it is indeed poisonous. Moreover, it can poison people through skin contact. From the looks of it, the toxicity is not small. As he spoke, Sun Qing stretched out his hand. His entire right hand was covered in red dots from his wrist to his entire wrist. I haven't seen any records of this green toad. It should be a frog that isn't in the records. It has a lot of research value. But before that, I have to go to the hospital. Before I leave, I have to express my joy to join this team. Sun Qing forced a smile and nodded to them. Professor Sun, are you all right? Papa Chen stood up and asked. Su Shan also walked forward to check on his hand. From the current reaction, it shouldn't be fatal. But since it's an unrecorded species, we can't rule out the possibility that it's a rare or even unseen poison. Ren Baqian looked at Sun Qing in a daze. This person's reaction after being poisoned seemed to be a little different from ordinary people. No wonder he was a professor that was one level higher than a saint. The next level would be a martyr, right? Ren Baqian started to admire him. Seeing that Sun Qing was about to leave, he quickly called out to him, Professor Sun, I have the antidote here. Sun Qing turned to look at Ren Baqian and said, I guessed so too. Carrying such a rare and fast-acting poison, as long as one isn't stupid, they would bring along the antidote. Ren Baqian's face twitched. He didn't know whether he should like or hate this person. Anyway, it was quite annoying to talk. He took out a small paper bag from his pocket. Inside was a kind of dried flower petal. Crush it and soak it in water before applying it to your skin, Ren Baqian said. Alright, you probably won't be able to use this thing, right? Then I won't stand on ceremony. Guo Qingwen took out 2 flower petals and put the paper bag into her pocket. Ren Baqian looked at his actions and didn't say anything. Sun Qing took a teacup and threw the petals into it. He then took out a pen from his pocket and used hot water to disinfect the tip of the pen. Then he crushed the petals. He looked up at Ren Baqian and asked, Cold water or hot water? Ren Baqian shrugged. I don't know. It should be cold, right? Sun Qing took some out and wrapped it in a piece of paper. Then he poured a small amount of cold water into it, stirred it, and wiped it on his hands. 10 minutes later, his hands were covered with red spots. It looked as though he had contracted some infectious disease. It was a little scary. Sun Qing suddenly said, The pain and itch are alleviated to a certain extent. It's effective. He then added some water to the flour paste and rubbed it on his hands again. Sun Qing and Su Shan observed carefully. After another 10 minutes, the red spots on his hands started to diminish. This thing is not bad. It's very effective. What kind of flour is it? Sun Qing asked. 9-wood flour, Ren Baqian said. What other uses does it have? I'm not sure about that, Ren Baqian replied honestly. Sun Qing nodded and said to Papa Chen, It's worth researching. When will the research start? It can already be started. There are still some equipment that will arrive later. It shouldn't affect the early stage of the research, Papa Chen said. Following which, they talked about the research lab. Ren Baqian and Qin Qing weren't interested. After saying goodbye, they went outside to smoke. Papa Chen looked at Ren Baqian's back and smiled. This was to show that he didn't want to be involved in the future. Papa Chen was very satisfied with this performance. He was really afraid that Ren Baqian, who was young and full of vigor, would want to make a career out of it. It would be easy for him to get into trouble. Now that the research was successful, he would gain fame and status, and Ren Baqian would get most of the profits. Ren Baqian accompanied Qin Qing to smoke a cigarette outside. He hadn't smoked for a long time. After smoking half a cigarette, he felt a little dizzy. However, it still felt good. How about it? Do you want to go and play tonight? Qin Qing poked him and asked. Oh yes, I haven't asked. What's the situation between you and my classmate? Ren Baqian immediately thought of Dong Haiqing. What else could it be? Qin Qing spread his hands. I know she's your classmate. I sent her back that night and didn't even go upstairs. I'm most afraid of this kind of relationship. It's too troublesome. Where's Jiang Nan? Let's have lunch together. I haven't seen her in a while since I've been running around. She should be at work. Let me make a call. After Qin Qing hung up the phone, he said to Ren Baqian, She's at the company. Let's go together later. Are you going tonight? Qin Qing asked again. It's still more fun with you around. There's no point in going alone. Am I your only friend? Ren Baqian asked with a smile. It should be easy for an influential person like Qin Qing to find someone to accompany him to go to the nightclub. You're the only one who can go out to drink and pick up girls. Qin Qing shrugged his shoulders. The two of them waited outside for a long time. When they saw Sun Qing and Su Shan coming out from the nightclub, they nodded at them. They went in to greet Papa Chen and went to look for Jiang Nan. Papa Chen invited Rinpochen to stay for lunch. However, Rinpochen felt uncomfortable eating with him. He felt more comfortable eating with Qin Qing. After lunch, Qin Qing returned to the law firm. Rinpochen went to buy 2 sets of clothes and went online at home. Now that the black mud cream's formula was settled, he could finally relax. As long as he waited for the black mud cream to hit the market, he would be able to earn a lot of money. He didn't have to worry about his future. He took the time to make a call home. Naturally, he was nagged by his mother again. In the middle of the call, his father took over the phone and asked him about the company he was talking about. In the end, he told him to be careful and not to be cheated by others. At night, he went to the bar with Qin Qing. At least he didn't return empty-handed. The girl that night was young, but she was very wild. After tossing and turning for half the night, when Rinpochen woke up the next morning, his back was still sore. Looking at the snow-white shoulders that were exposed under the blanket, Rinpochen shook his head. Both parties had a purely physical relationship. Of course, they couldn't be tainted by unbearable feelings. Naturally, there was no need to communicate. He put on his clothes and prepared to go home to catch up on sleep. Chapter 44. After surfing the internet for 2 days, Rinpochen once again returned to that world. This time, he didn't bring anything with him. When he slept, he wasn't worried about leaving anything behind on Earth. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. He went out to see how the 2 little chaps were doing, but they weren't outside. There were bamboo leaves scattered on the ground and a puddle of water not far away. It seemed like they had just left. Rinpochen looked around and found the 2 little chaps outside a cage in the living area of the wild beasts. One of them was leaning on the cage and peering inside. The other one was rolling on the ground and continued to roll. Then, it hit its head on a rock. Rinpochen almost laughed when he saw the guy sitting on the ground in a daze after knocking down the rock. These 2 little chaps had familiarized themselves with the surrounding environment over the past few days. In addition, it wasn't too hot this morning, so they came out to explore. The one that had been rolling was Gun Gun. It shook its head, ran behind Tian Tian, and bumped its butt, causing Tian Tian to tumble. The 2 pandas immediately rolled into a ball. Following which, the 2 chaps staggered and continued to explore. There was an extremely beautiful big bird in the cage just now and it didn't pay attention to the 2 chaps. The 2 little chaps didn't go far before they became interested in another iron cage. Rinpochen had an impression of this cage. Inside were 2 rabbits that were as big as dogs and had mouths full of fangs. When the 2 chaps went over, the rabbit pounced on them and hit the iron cage. It made a gurgling sound from its throat, scaring the 2 chaps into a ball. Rinpochen then picked them up with each hand and walked back. When he returned to the entrance of the house, he put the 2 chaps there. In the end, Tian Tian hugged Rinpochen's arm and didn't let go. It was as if it was glued to his arm. Gun Gun also hugged one of Rinpochen's legs and climbed up. Rinpochen managed to shake off the 2 chaps with great difficulty. After breakfast, he went to the fields to take a look. The 2 mu of land used for seasoning had already been plowed. A few odd job workers had nothing to do, so they plowed the sweet potato field again. Seeing this situation, Rinpochen called for 2 people to follow him back to the house to get the Sichuan peppercorns, sesame seeds, cumin peppercorns, and sprouted sweet potatoes to prepare for planting. Rinpochen couldn't help much with the planting. Ever since he was young, he had never even touched a hoe. Rinpochen told them about the cultivation methods that he had seen on the internet. The 5 odd job workers nodded their heads in agreement. They didn't expect that there were so many ways to cultivate. They looked at Rinpochen with admiration. As for the sweet potato, it was much simpler. This thing was very adaptable. It could dig a hole and bury it at a certain distance. In the first week, he had to water diligently to prevent the seedlings from dying. After the second week, it would be easier. Until the harvest, he only had to turn over the sweet potato vines a few times to prevent them from taking root. After settling these matters, Renbachian dragged Teng Hulu and Tai Dao to the blacksmith shop in Baisher district to check on the progress of his fan. Shop owner. Renbachian entered the shop and greeted the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper looked up at him and took out a wooden box from behind. Inside the box were the fan and the custom-made one that Renbachian had brought. Take a look. The shop owner stuffed the fan into Renbachian's hands. Renbachian took a closer look. The fan blades were covered in layers of decorative patterns. It was obvious that they were forged with a hammer and looked rather beautiful. If the fan blades were to be sharpened, it could probably be used as a murder weapon. The bearing inside was also rather smooth. It seemed that there was no problem. Renbachian took out a rubber ring from his bosom and attached it to a rope before pulling it. The fan started to spin as expected. Renbachian's hand that was holding the fan trembled a little. It seemed that the roundness of the bearing was not enough. However, he was already very satisfied with the workmanship. Good craftsmanship. Renbachian gave a thumbs up and said, "Of course, my craftsmanship is among the top 3 in the entire Baisher district." After hearing Renbachian's praise, the shopkeeper immediately raised his head proudly. Renbachian chuckled. "Just do as I said before and make another 20. The price is still 2 taels of silver each. How long will it take?" After hearing Renbachian's words, the shopkeeper revealed a smile. After thinking for a while, he said, 10 days. The main problem is that the thing inside needs to be polished slowly. Renbachian knew that the shopkeeper was talking about the bearing. 10 days was acceptable. He immediately paid the deposit and wrapped the 2 fans in cloth. Teng Hulu and Tai Dao each carried 1 fan. After leaving the blacksmith shop, they first went to Jingyuan Road to see how the most important shop was doing. When they arrived, they saw that the shop's door was wide open. 2 men were working inside. The bottom of the wall was covered with wooden planks. The top of the wall was covered with white ash. The floor was also covered with a layer of wooden flooring. There were also some chairs and wooden tables in the room. Everything was made of solid wood. All the wood was coated with a layer of sumac sap. It had a slightly pungent smell. However, this substance was completely environmentally friendly. Although the smell was a little pungent, it would dissipate in a few days. The coating of this layer of lacquer prevented the wood from rotting easily and also prevented it from attracting bugs. In this world, only furniture makers would add color to the sumac sap. However, Renbachian had completely retained the natural color of the wood. It looked fresh and natural, and it was comfortable to enter. After standing outside and looking around, Renbachian did not go in. Instead, he brought the 2 of them back to the Beast Park. After putting down the things, Renbachian pulled the carpenter Tong Jia into the Beast Park and whispered to him softly. Tong Jia was more than 1.8 meters tall. He had a shaved head and would bare his arms whenever he was free. His bronze-colored muscles were exposed and he looked more like a thug than a carpenter. However, he was a carpenter in the Beast Park. His main job was to repair the houses and beast pens. His craftsmanship was not very good and was barely passable. However, Renbachian had seen the things he made and felt that they were not bad. At least, this level of craftsmanship was not bad on Earth. Renbachian pulled Tong Jia and gestured as he whispered to him for a long time. At first, Tong Jia was at a loss. When he knew that they were going to make a box, he immediately said, "This is easy." Then, they gathered a pile of wood and started sawing it to make a box. The others saw that the 2 of them were acting mysteriously and did not know what they were doing. The 2 of them spent the whole afternoon making a box with a thin wooden grid in front. They placed the fan in the box and stuck it. Then, they made another box and drilled a row of small holes at the bottom. Then, they put the cloth through the holes and fastened a button. Renbachian put the box into the box and wiped his sweat. For the whole afternoon, Tong Jia worked with his bronze-colored muscles on his upper body. He kept giving instructions at the side and ended up exhausting himself. Looking at the weird thing that Renbachian was making, Caretaker Sure came over and asked, "Brother Ren, what are you making?" Renbachian was startled by the loud voice. He raised his head and saw that it was indeed Caretaker Sure. His voice was definitely gifted and it was at the maximum level. "Wait a minute, I will show you something fun later." After hearing what Rinpochen said, caretaker sure smiled and waited at the side to see what Rinpochen was going to make. You, Teng Hulu, go and get some ice from the ice house. Tai Dao, go and get a bucket of water, Rinpochen shouted. After a while, the two of them returned. Rinpochen grabbed a handful of crushed ice and placed it in the box. Then he filled the box with water. The ice water started to drip down along the cloth. Rinpochen estimated that it was about time. He pulled caretaker Sher to the front of the box and made it face the grid. Wait here, I will start soon. He instructed Tai Dao to place a stool under the box and increase the height of the stool. He then stood beside the box, held the rope that was used to pull the fan, and pulled it up. Chapter 45. What's this? Caretaker Sher's eyes widened in surprise. Air cooler, Rinpochen said. He pulled the rope a few more times and shouted, Hulu, come and pull the rope. Then, he ran to the air cooler to enjoy the cool breeze. Teng Hulu imitated Rinpochen and pulled the rope before releasing it. The cool breeze immediately blew on Rinpochen's body, making him feel very comfortable. It was so comfortable to enjoy an air cooler in this world. Tong Jia also ran to Rinpochen's side. He wanted to try out the thing that he had been busy making for the whole afternoon. He squeezed slightly on Rinpochen's body and almost made him tumble. After Rinpochen stabilized himself, he glared at him. Tong Jia gave him a simple and honest smile. Rinpochen was so angry that he wanted to kick him. However, the cool breeze on such a hot day was too comfortable. He opened his arms and closed his eyes in satisfaction. Unfortunately, he did not enjoy it for long before the cool breeze disappeared. When he opened his eyes, Caretaker Sher was squatting in front of the box, trying to figure out how the cold breeze came out. The cold breeze blew on his face. How could it still reach Rinpochen, who was behind him? How can this thing blow out wind? Caretaker Sher asked as he looked into the box. Rinpochen thought about how to explain. After some thought, he simply said, You won't understand even if I tell you. What do you think will happen if we sell this thing? Rinpochen squatted beside Caretaker Sher and laughed. It should be possible to sell it, right? But it's a little troublesome. Someone needs to pull the rope, right? Caretaker Sher said with uncertainty. It's not should, it's definitely, Rinpochen said with certainty. Caretaker Sher's business sense was too bad. However, this was normal. Most people in Dayo were like this. Do you remember that I mentioned selling ice? This thing is more effective than putting ice in the house. It cools down faster, Rinpochen said. It's such a good thing, it's better to send it to Her Majesty, Caretaker Sher said after some thought. It's a little too crude. Rinpochen naturally knew that he had to send one to the Empress first, but the one in front of him was really not presentable. Indeed, the box on the outside was made of wood that had just been sawed open. Although the woodworking skills of this world were quite good, and they were all connected with mortise and tenon joints, which would definitely attract a lot of rich people back on Earth, it still couldn't hide the crudeness of the box. In the modern world, everyone knew that the packaging had to be beautiful, classy, and classy. An item worth 100 renminbi had to be packaged with 100 renminbi to make it look like it was worth 1,000 renminbi. Although the main function of the air conditioner was the function of the air conditioner, if Rinpochen had a choice, he would rather have a $100 air conditioner with a $200 package. Can it create complex patterns? Rinpochen turned his head and asked Tong Jia. I don't know. It depends on what it looks like. Tong Jia rubbed the back of his head and answered honestly. Let me think about what pattern to make, Rinpochen said. Now that it was so simple and crude, there was no point in gifting it to the Empress. No matter what, it had to be done beautifully. Even if she was the Empress, a woman's nature wouldn't change, right? What is the nature of women? Glittering gold? Like the dragons? You can't move when you see shiny things? This was the first thought that crossed Rinpochen's mind. Soon after, he shook his head. After all, this was the Empress. No matter how poor Dayo was, the Empress wouldn't lack gold and gemstones. Furthermore, Dayo had a lot of gemstones. It was just that most of them were deep in the mountains and were difficult to excavate. Most of them were picked up in the open. In that case, what else could a woman like? Cute? If it was an ordinary woman, it might be possible. When he thought about how the Empress sent the polar bear flying with a slap, Rinpoche felt that it was impossible. After thinking for a while, Rinpoche couldn't figure out anything. He shook his head and decided not to think about this matter for now. He found a chef to cook a small meal for them. After that, Rinpoche returned to the house. There was no entertainment at night in this world. Other than making babies after dark, other than sleeping, Rinpoche was still not used to this kind of schedule. Since he couldn't fall asleep, he sat at the door and teased Gun Gun and Tion Tion. The two little chaps were originally lying on their backs on the ground. After he woke them up, they climbed onto his body. As a result, the two little chaps stopped moving when they climbed onto his knees. After taking a closer look, he realized that they had actually fallen asleep. Rinpoche had no choice but to look up at the starry sky. The starry sky in this world was still very beautiful. When he looked up, he could see countless stars. Among them, there were 2 starlight rivers and a huge disk. He wasn't sure if it was a nebula. This kind of starry sky was magnificent and he was momentarily dazed. While looking at it, Rinpoche suddenly thought of an idea. If he were to take a picture of this starry sky and post it on the internet, would those netizens and astronomers go crazy? It was a pity that he didn't bring his cell phone. Another idea immediately popped up in his mind. If he were to put this starry sky on a box, it would definitely be magnificent. After thinking of this idea, he immediately couldn't sit still. He looked down and saw that the 2 little chaps were actually drooling all over him. He quickly put them down and ran to look for Tong Jia. He thought that Tong Jia had already fallen asleep. He didn't expect him to be smiling foolishly at the air cooler and pulling the rope with his hand. "Come out, I have an idea." Rinpoche went forward and pulled Tong Jia's arm, wanting to pull him up. In the end, he couldn't move him even after using all his strength. "Ah!" Tong Jia turned his head and looked at Rinpoche with a silly smile. Rinpoche looked at that silly smile, clenched his teeth, and kicked Tong Jia's leg. "Get up and come out with me." Tong Jia then got up and asked, "Caretaker Ren, what's wrong?" "Come out first." Rinpoche called Tong Jia out of the house, pointed to the starry sky above his head, and asked, "Can you put the starry sky on the box?" Tong Jia was at a loss. "Just carve it, I will think of a way to do the rest," Rinpoche said. "Oh, it should be possible. I see these stars every day, I am very familiar with them," Tong Jia said with a simple and honest face. "That's it then. Tomorrow, carve this starry sky on the box, especially these 2 galaxies and that circle. You must not burn them. Also, carve some stars that you are more familiar with." "Okay, I can do this," Tong Jia immediately said. "Is 1 day enough?" "Yes, it won't even take 1 day." "All right, you should settle this matter tomorrow. Do I need to draw it first?" Rinpoche asked. "No need, it's all in my head." Rinpoche didn't say anything else after hearing what Tong Jia said. He hummed a tune and went back to his house to sleep. The next morning, Rinpoche went to look for Tong Jia with a biscuit in his mouth. He sat beside Tong Jia and watched him dismantle the box and carve the starry sky on a few surfaces. Rinpoche took out the air cooler and placed it on his knees. He pulled the rope from time to time. In the afternoon, Tong Jia raised his head and shouted, "Caretaker Ren, it's done." Chapter 46. There were dai and sumac sap in the beast park. After all, the beast park belonged to the royal family. The things they used were much better than the commoners. The box had a total of 6 sides. The bottom side was completely flat. The other 5 boards were facing upwards. Wood shavings were sprinkled on them. After pressing them down a few times, the wood shavings were swept away. This way, the holes in the box were basically filled with wood shavings. Then, a black and blue dye made from an unknown fruit was mixed with the sumac sap. After that, the few boards turned dark blue. After finishing, Rinpoche put the boards aside. He looked at the sky and estimated that it was almost time to eat. He went to the kitchen to eat. There was a big courtyard outside the kitchen. At this moment, there were more than 10 tables. This was the time when the entire Beast Park was the most crowded. Regardless of gender, everyone was gathered here. There were even naked children wrestling there. The adults were happily watching from a distance and didn't care. Renbachien saw a 6 or 7-year-old child being thrown to the ground with a piece of skin on his knee. He didn't care at all. He stood up and started screaming. Each of them bared their fangs and brandished their claws like a crab. Children who grew up in such an environment were used to it. Caretaker Ren, sit here. Someone stood up and shouted. Renbachien looked and saw Tai Dao. Although he had stayed in the Beast Park for some time, he didn't have many opportunities to eat with the others. Including today, it was only the second time. Usually he was busy with something or was in the palace. He would only go to the kitchen when it was dark. Renbachien sat with Tai Dao and the others. He and his 10 subordinates formed a table. When the dishes were served, he took a look. There was roasted lamb leg, roasted lamb ribs, boiled beef, a pot of wild vegetable soup, and a plate of stir-fried eggs with vegetables. When the dishes were served, everyone ignored Renbachien. In the blink of an eye, the plate of stir-fried eggs with vegetables was gone. Each of them had a bowl of wild vegetable soup and were eating the lamb ribs. Renbachien blinked his eyes and was speechless. All he saw was a bunch of dirty hands sweeping past, and then there was nothing left. In Daeyo, meat was cheap and vegetables were expensive. Almost every meal was meat. 2 dishes of vegetables were gone in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, this group of people didn't have the habit of using chopsticks. Chopsticks came from Great Xia. Usually, only rich people and officials would use them. Renbachien slurped the wild vegetable soup, nibbled on a piece of lamb chop, and ate some of the dry rations here. This type of dry food was a type of coarse grain. It was coarse, a little harsh on the throat, and a little sour. However, none of them despised it. There were also refined rice and noodles, but only the rich could afford them. It was already good enough that the people in the Beast Park could eat this. It was said that the people in the mountain stockade ate meat for every meal, and their supplementary food consisted of berries and wild vegetables. On Earth, eating meat was considered good food, but here, it was the most basic diet. If you were to trade a caddy of wild vegetables for a few caddies of meat, there would be plenty of people willing to trade with you. Fortunately, Daeyo still had another product, which was tea leaves. There were many wild tea trees on the mountain. As a result, the people of Daeyo didn't have to fight over a brick of tea like the people of the grassland. After finishing his meal, he returned to Tong Jia's place. Seeing that the dye on the wood was almost dry, he placed the panel upside down on the ground and used a hammer to knock on the back twice. When he picked it up again, most of the chips had fallen off, revealing holes in the wood. Renbachien was delighted when he saw the first wooden plank. Although it hadn't met his requirements, the first step had already met his expectations. Following which, he did the same for the other planks and placed them together. Renbachien was stunned. The dark blue plank was filled with light-colored stars. The 2 Milky Way and the nebula were embellished on it. It really looked like the starry sky he saw last night. Subconsciously, he looked up at the sky. At this moment, the sky had just turned dark and there were only a few stars. They were sparse and looked like pockmarks scattered on the sky. It was far from the magnificent sight he saw last night. He lowered his head and continued to look at the plank. The only problem was that the dye on the plank wasn't evenly applied. However, this was a small problem and it would be fine after 2 more brushes. Thinking of this, Renbachien picked up the seasoning beside him and brushed another layer on the plank. This time, he didn't have to worry about the seasoning getting into the holes. He just needed to take a look and make sure that there was no problem. Caretaker Ren, is this okay? Tong Jia came to Renbachien's side and asked. Renbachien searched his chest pocket. He originally wanted to find a piece of silver as this craftsmanship deserved a reward. He couldn't just let the horse work and not feed it. However, he didn't have anything on him. Usually, when he didn't go out, he was too lazy to carry silver in his chest pocket. Beautifully done. Renbachien gave a thumbs up. Leave it here first, I will come back tomorrow. Renbachien patted Tong Jia's shoulder, which was half a head taller and half a head thicker than him. All right, do I need to put it on? No need, this will do. Wait for the color to dry and put it in the house. Take it out tomorrow morning and brush it again. After Renbachien finished speaking, he strolled back with his hands behind his back. Tian was sprawled out and sleeping outside the door. Gungun's but was on the stone slab that was more than 10 centimeters high. Its head was on the ground, and it was lying upside down. Renbachien walked closer and could even hear light snoring sounds. The two little guys' bellies rose and fell, so he touched them. The two little guys grunted in dissatisfaction and turned over to continue sleeping. The next morning, he put a few ingots of silver into his chest pocket and pulled Tai Dao and Teng Hulu out with a few planks. He was going to melt the silver and drip it into the holes on the planks that were arranged according to the position of the starry sky. The dark blue background was dotted with silver stars. It must be extremely beautiful. When they reached Tongjia, Renbachien took out a piece of silver that was worth about 1 tael and handed it to him. Take it, this is for you. How can I ask for money to work for caretaker Ren? I have a monthly salary. Tongjia waved his hands. This is for you, don't talk nonsense. Renbachien immediately threw the piece of silver to him in a parabola. Tongjia hurriedly caught it. Thank you, caretaker Ren. Tongjia held the silver and smiled. This piece of silver was equivalent to his monthly salary for more than half a month. But Renbachien nodded his head and looked at the planks carefully. The dye on them had just dried, and after 3 rounds of coloring, they looked much more beautiful. Although some parts were deep and some were shallow due to the different grain of the wood, it already looked rather beautiful. He shouted for Tai Dao and Teng Hulu, who were behind him, to carry 2 or 3 planks each and follow behind him. Halfway through, Renbachien took out the few pieces of silver from his chest pocket and stuffed them into his waist pocket. Silver was really heavy when one carried too much of it. It was really uncomfortable to keep it in one's chest pocket. When they arrived at Baishir district, it was still the blacksmith shop from before. Shopkeeper, melt this piece of silver and pour it into the holes on the planks. You must make it flat, Renbachien shouted as he took out a piece of silver and tossed it in his hand. The shopkeeper came over and looked at it carefully. Then he looked at the piece of silver in Renbachien's hand and said concisely, "It's not enough, you need another piece." Renbachien threw another piece over and the shopkeeper nodded his head. All right, come back in 4 hours to collect it. Renbachien led the two of them to Jingyang Road to check on the shop. In the end, not long after they turned into Jingyang Road, they heard the angry voice of a woman coming from a shop by the roadside. We spent a lot of effort to make this piece of skin. This is the white skin of a sharp-toothed tiger, and there are no scars at all. Yet, it can only be exchanged for half a bucket of salt. When Renbachien heard this voice, he immediately turned around and saw 2 familiar figures in the shop. One of them was the woman named Na Gu, and the other should be her brother. He did not expect to see the 2 of them again after only a few days. They were holding a roll of skin in their hands. Among the rolls of skin, one of the white skin was opened and displayed by the 2 of them. Chapter 47. A dough was a unit of measurement. A dough was about 6 caddies. Half a dough was about 3 caddies, which was about 3 taels of silver. 1 tael of salt per caddy was equivalent to an ordinary person's monthly income. This price was indeed expensive. He remembered some nutritionists on Earth said that an ordinary person should consume 5 grams of salt a day. That was 3 taels of salt a month. A family of 3 would consume about 1 caddy of salt a month. This was very cheap for people on Earth, but it was extremely expensive for people in Dayo. Even the chefs in the Beast Park used less salt in their food. In Dayo, meat was a main dish and also a staple food. On one hand, salt was expensive. On the other hand, it was inedible if it was too salty. From the food that Renbachien ate in the Beast Park, people in Dayo ate at most half of the amount of salt that people on Earth ate. It could be seen that people in Dayo were very frugal with salt. An ordinary family in Dayo could barely afford to eat half a caddy of salt a month for a family of 3. Even so, salt was indeed a huge burden. It wasn't the first time that something like this happened in the shop, and it wouldn't be the last. People had to eat salt, but Dayo didn't produce salt. They could only be at the mercy of these merchants. Similarly, people in Dayo didn't know how to tan fur. If the fur wasn't sold, it would rot in a short period of time. With these factors added together, the foreign merchants in Dayo seemed to have formed a tacit understanding. Whether it was the price of fur or the price of salt, they were almost the same. This way, they could obtain the biggest profit. Renbachien stood at the entrance of the shop and looked at the dispute inside. He shook his head slightly. This was the consequence of a country lacking in resources and technology. "Let's go," Renbachien said. He brought Teng Hulu and Tai Dao to the entrance of the shop. There was nothing much to see inside, so they turned to the Chen family's shop. Chen Zixing had been anxiously waiting for Renbachien for the past few days. He couldn't understand a single word of the 3 books in his hands. This made him extremely anxious. After seeing Renbachien, his eyes lit up. "Mr. Ren, you are finally here. I have been waiting for you these few days. I promised you that I would definitely translate for you." Renbachien laughed. After Chen Zixing finished treating the patient, he asked his disciple to take his place. He pulled Renbachien into the inner room and carefully took out 3 books from a box. Renbachien picked up various treatises on typhoid and diseases and asked Chen Zixing to prepare a pen and paper to record the contents. Following Renbachien's reading, Chen Zixing's hand moved quickly on the paper like a chicken's claws. It was so fast that it looked like an illusion. Renbachien couldn't help but admire the speed at which he wrote. Looking at his handwriting, he was even more impressed. He reckoned that even a cryptographer wouldn't be able to crack it. After reading for less than 2 hours, Renbachien felt hungry. However, it wasn't easy to come here. Seeing that Chen Zixing had no intention of resting, Renbachien gulped down water with all his might. If you're hungry, drink more water to fill your stomach. After reading for 3 hours, Chen Zixing's eyes were wide open and his body was drenched in sweat. Renbachien had no choice but to stop. If copying this thing tired him out, it would be a great sin. When Renbachien stopped, Chen Zixing immediately threw away his pen. His hand was trembling like a chicken's claws. "I'm so tired," Chen Zixing shouted loudly. He grabbed a jar of water and poured it into his mouth. After Chen Zixing finished drinking the water, his right hand was still trembling. He didn't forget to raise his head and ask Su Wen, "How much have you written?" "About 8 more times." Renbachien looked at the thickness of the book and said. Chen Zixing clenched his teeth and shook his hand. "I'll get my disciple to come in and write." "Forget it, I still have something to do. I'll come back another day," Renbachien said. When Chen Zixing heard this, it was as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He heaved a sigh of relief. All right. It seemed like he was really exhausted after reading for more than 2 hours just now. Renbachien reckoned that if he had to write continuously for more than 2 hours, which was equivalent to 3 hours, he would probably tremble even more than Chen Zixing. He brought Teng Hulu and Tai Dao, who had long fallen asleep on the bed, to the blacksmith shop. Just as they walked out of the medicine shop, they heard an indignant voice from the side. "Our animal hides were only exchanged for 1.5 bushels of salt. The stronghold can't even last a few days. We might as well rob that shop tonight." When Renbachien heard this voice, he was elated. They were really fated to meet again. He turned his head and saw Nagu and a burly man standing at one side. Nagu's face was pale and her mouth was hanging so much that one could hang a soy sauce bottle. "Don't talk nonsense. You should go back and see if you can hunt for more prey these few days." The burly man was carrying a bag and lecturing her. The bag should be filled with the salt that the 2 of them exchanged for. "It's a pity that we can't eat the salt water in the mountains. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to buy salt from them." "How is that salt water?" "That is poisonous water. Even animals don't eat it. In the past, some people have eaten it. Although it has a salty taste, they would get goosebumps and vomit after eating it. Some people would even faint and die." If we want to eat that, we might as well rob their shop at night. The burly man snorted coldly. Renbachien was about to walk past the two of them. When he heard this, he was startled and immediately stopped. Both of you? Renbachien turned around and cupped his hands. Who are you? The burly man looked over with a fierce look. Ah, you are that? Nagu recognized Renbachien. I heard both of you talking about salt water just now. May I know what it is like? Renbachien inquired. When the burly man heard his question, he snorted coldly and ignored him. He had just suffered a bellyful of anger from those few shops and had no place to vent it. I am not from the Yun nation, nor am I from the Chen nation. I am also not from Great Xia. I am currently working in the Beast Park. The matters between the two of you and those merchants have nothing to do with me. Logically speaking, I should be considered a Dayo citizen now. Renbachien looked at the attitude of the two of them. He didn't need to think to know the whole story. This is caretaker Ren of the Beast Park, Tai Dao interrupted from behind. The Beast Park was attached to the palace. When the two of them heard that Renbachien was working in the Beast Park, their expressions became better. They turned around and sized up Renbachien. Why are you asking about salt water? Someone has already thought of a way to make it edible. Even the wild beasts in the mountains don't eat it. If it's poisonous, it really can't be eaten. However, perhaps we can refine it to remove the poison. Then, you won't have to worry about eating salt anymore, Renbachien said. Impossible, the burly man said resolutely. Don't bother. Someone has already thought of that, Nagu said. Her attitude towards Renbachien was much better than the burly man. Perhaps it was because she had bumped into Renbachien before, so she didn't feel so unfamiliar with him. Can I know after listening to both of you talk about the salt water first? Renbachien asked. That water comes from a pool on the mountain. The water is salty, bitter, and smelly. We call it the Black Pool, Nagu said. The water is black? Is it the smell of rotten eggs? Renbachien quickly asked. Chapter 48. After hearing Nagu's words, Renbachien was more certain. When he heard about the poisonous brine, he already had an idea. Although it was poisonous, everything in the world was made up of ions and molecules. Under certain conditions, there would definitely be a chemical reaction. This meant that the salt could be extracted or the toxicity could be eliminated. The black water was also emitting the smell of rotten eggs. It was very likely to be a kind of black brine. This kind of thing existed on Earth, and it had been refined and used by the ancient people using the crystallization of wisdom nearly 2,000 years ago. This was the predecessor of the famous well salt. After understanding the situation in this world, Renbachien specially researched all kinds of information about well salt. In fact, it wasn't just the sea that produced salt. People in Sichuan, Tibet, and other places used various methods to extract salt from nature, which was a necessity for daily life. There were also various methods. Sunning salt from natural brine on the surface and salt crystallization from saline alkali land were the simplest. Without these conditions, there were many other methods to produce salt. Well salt was one of them. Among them were black brine wells, yellow brine wells, and stone wells. They mainly extracted seawater that accumulated underground after the evolution of the Earth's crust. Or in other words, metamorphosed seawater. The black brine well referred to the poisonous black brine. This metamorphosed seawater was usually 300 meters underground. However, due to earthquakes or other reasons, it would occasionally form springs or pools. It was precisely because of this that Renbachien immediately thought of this when he heard them mention the poisonous brine. Do you have that brown brine there? It's also salty and poisonous, Renbachien immediately asked. The reason why he asked this was because black brine contained a large amount of sulfate and yellow brine contained barium. Both types of brine were poisonous to the human body. However, if they were mixed together in a suitable ratio, the sulfate and barium could be converted into barium sulfate crystals. This would eliminate the toxicity and allow the extraction of well salt. Of course, the premise was that the black pool was indeed black brine. Furthermore, There were no other poisonous ingredients in it. According to the short description just now, Renbaqian felt that the first possibility was very high. As for the second possibility, it was hard to say. The burly man replied coldly. Even though he knew that Renbaqian worked in the Beast Park, it only made him less hostile. It didn't mean that he would treat Renbaqian kindly. In fact, Renbaqian's thin and weak body looked similar to the people of the Yun Nation and Great Xia. He didn't like people like him. This had already penetrated deep into his bones. Nagu suddenly thought of something and turned around to refute the burly man. The last time we met in the mountains, Dagong was so thirsty that he drank a mouthful of water. After that, he didn't have any energy for the entire afternoon and shot an arrow straight at the toothed beast's face. You were almost pierced through by the beast. Wasn't that water what he said? The man snorted coldly and turned his head away. Nagu turned to look at Renbaqian and said, "There's a crevice in the mountain. The water there is exactly like what you said, but it's a little brown and can't be drunk." Renbaqian was delighted to hear this. He was just asking in passing. He didn't expect that there would really be one. "May I know where your village is?" Renbaqian asked. "What are you doing?" Nagu immediately became vigilant. "I don't know where your village is. Where can I find the black water pool and the other water?" Renbaqian asked. "Why are you looking for this thing? Do you think you can use it as salt? I already told you that it's poisonous." Nagu looked at him suspiciously. Since it's poisonous, there must be a way to detoxify it. Everything in this world reinforces and counteracts each other. I don't believe you," Nagu said straightforwardly. "You have to try to find out. If you really want to look for it, I can hire you as a guide and use salt as revenge. How about that?" Renbaqian tried to tempt her. Nagu rolled her eyes and stuck out a finger. "I'm a good hunter. If you want to hire me as a guide, you will need at least half a caddy of salt a day." Renbaqian looked at her outstretched finger and thought about what she said. He was very curious. If she wanted half a caddy of salt, what would she do? Stick out 2 fingers? At the thought of this, Renbaqian subconsciously stuck out 2 fingers and asked, "How many is this?" Nagu was stunned at first. Then she flew into a rage and asked, "Do you think I'm a fool?" She immediately flashed her fists, which were 1 size bigger than those of the women on Earth. She didn't forget to bare her teeth at Renbaqian like an enraged cat. Renbaqian estimated the strength of the Dayo people and looked at Nagu's fists. He estimated that if he was hit in the chest by such a small fist, he would probably vomit his liver out. "Half a caddy of salt, I agree." Renbaqian immediately changed his words. "Well, if you have a good hunter like me as your guide, you will benefit greatly." Nagu retracted her fist, raised her head, and proudly said with her chest puffed out, "Are you really from the Beast Park?" Nagu thought for a while and asked again. Renbaqian took out a sign from his pocket and said, "Look at it yourself." "I don't recognize it. I don't understand it." Nagu spread out her hands. "I told you long ago that this is Caretaker Ren from the Beast Park. Do you think he would impersonate you to deceive you?" Tai Dao said. Nagu looked at Tai Dao and then at Renbaqian before saying, "I'll believe you first. Our village is on 9 Peaks Mountain. After you leave the city, head southwest and you will reach there in 1 day. There is a lowing horn at the foot of the mountain. If you blow it, I will hear it." "What horn at the foot of the mountain? Where can I find it?" Renbaqian spread out his hands. How was it possible to find a horn at the foot of the mountain? What was the difference between this and looking for a needle in a haystack? "It's not a horn, it's a luoing horn." "You don't even know what a luoing horn is?" "There is a stick erected at the foot of the mountain. The luoing horn is hanging on it." Nagu widened her eyes and looked at Renbaqian. Renbaqian saw that Nagu was looking at him as if he was an alien who didn't even know what a luoing horn was. He turned to look at Tai Dao and asked, "What is a luoing horn?" A luoing is a wild beast in the mountains. It has a single horn and is as fast as lightning. When the horn is plucked from its head, the sound can be heard 5 kilometers away. Tai Dao explained. "Can it really be heard 5 kilometers away?" Renbaqian had a doubtful look on his face. What did it mean to be heard 5 kilometers away? 10 kilometers was about 5 kilometers. It would take about an hour to walk. Even if it was in an open space, to be heard 5 kilometers away would require at least 120 to 130 decibels. It was probably the sound of an airplane taking off or thunder. Renbachian didn't believe that a horn could be blown so loudly. Tai Dao smacked his lips and said, "There are usually big-eared monkeys in the village. If they can hear the sound of the lowing horn from afar, they will know that there are guests coming." Renbachian finally understood. He turned to look at Nagu. He wanted to ask her where the lowing horn was, but she probably wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. In that case, let's go back first. If we are going to look for the black pool, we will go to 9 Peaks Mountain to look for you. Remember to bring salt, Nagu reminded him. I won't forget. In that case, goodbye. Renbachian cupped his hands. After walking for a distance, Teng Hulu asked, Caretaker Ren, can salt really be extracted from the black pool? It's not extracting, it's refining. As for whether or not it's harmless, it will depend on the situation, Renbachian said. He wasn't very confident and could only say half of it. If that's the case, that would be great. Teng Hulu was a little excited. This matter requires Her Majesty's approval, Renbachian said unhurriedly. As long as Caretaker Ren has a solution, Her Majesty will definitely support it, Teng Hulu said. There will definitely be official positions that will be awarded. Renbachian grinned. This was also one of the reasons why he asked about this matter. Since he was here, he couldn't possibly stay in the Beast Park and be a caretaker forever, right? Or would he be satisfied by making some items from Earth and earning some money? If he was in a world similar to ancient China, he might really do that. There was nothing wrong with being carefree. However, there were too many unknowns in this world. Without a high status, he wouldn't be able to understand too much. For example, he hadn't seen the Kirin until now. It was said that there was someone in the palace in charge of it. Chapter 49. When he arrived at the blacksmith shop, Renbachian saw a few blue wooden boards placed at the side. They were like the night sky. Countless silver dots formed a river that spanned across it. When he took a few steps forward, the melted silver dots reflected the light, giving him the illusion that he was looking at the galaxy at night. It's done, take it away. The remaining silver from your wages is enough, the shop owner said without raising his head. Renbachian felt that this creation was magnificent, but the shop owner did not seem to feel anything. Due to the low technical content, he was not willing to take a second look. When Renbachian walked closer, he felt that it was much more beautiful from afar than up close. However, he was already satisfied with this. It was enough for him to reach this level. After looking at the front of the 5 wooden boards, there was nothing to nitpick about. Tai Dao and Teng Hulu carried the boxes back to the Beast Park. They first went to Tong Jia's place to assemble the air cooler and placed it outside the house. Renbachian crossed his arms and looked at it from all angles. The effect didn't seem to be as good as before. It seemed that it was too bright. Under the direct sunlight, even though the silver dots were sparkling, some of the flaws in the box were magnified. Why was the effect so good in the blacksmith shop just now? Naturally, it was because of the lack of light. Renbachian was well aware that it was easier to conceal the flaws of an item in a dark place. For example, when he looked at himself in the mirror in the bathroom, he always felt that he was already handsome to a certain extent. However, when he looked at himself in the mirror under the sun, he immediately felt that it wasn't his own face. This was a tragic story. However, with such an experience, he immediately moved the air cooler back into the house. It was indeed more pleasing to the eye now. Especially after he closed the door and lit 2 oil lamps, Renbachian immediately felt that this air cooler was already a fighter among air coolers. Does it look good? Renbachian crossed his arms with a satisfied look and asked Tong Jia without turning his head. Caretaker Ren, if you say it looks good, then it looks good, Tong Jia replied honestly. Renbachian glanced at him. Who said that this fellow was simple and honest? He asked someone to move the air cooler back to his house. Renbachian originally thought that the Empress would summon him to the palace today and he would be able to directly present the air cooler to her. However, no one came to the palace until nightfall. Renbachian went to the kitchen and found half a leg of lamb. He cut it into slices, returned it to the wok, and stir-fried it. He returned to his room and slept. When he woke up, he was back in the real world. Nothing much had happened in the past 3 days. He had nothing better to do, but he had been drinking beer for 3 days straight. In addition, he had gone out to buy a few things over the past 2 days. One was an e-book device that stored information on salt wells, the development of smelting, and the development of agricultural tools. Another was a few novels, including Journey to the West, 3 Kingdoms, Investiture of the Gods, and a few web novels. These could be used to pass the time. If the Empress wanted to listen to stories, he wasn't afraid of forgetting the content. This thing could be used for about 20 days on a full charge, which should be enough. The other item was an essential self-defense item that Renbachian had forgotten on his previous 2 trips back, an electric baton. It was slightly bigger than a palm and looked similar to a flashlight. It was said that it could discharge electricity for 20 minutes before it lit up. Normally, it would only take a few seconds to a dozen seconds, and it could be used about 100 times. As for electric current and voltage, he did not know much about it. As for its power, the boss mysteriously told him that even a strong and burly man would faint after being poked by it. Renbachian reckoned that with the physique of a Dayo person, a few seconds would definitely not be enough. Even if it couldn't knock out the other party, it could still numb the other party's body and make them unable to move. Otherwise, if he encountered any trouble outside, he would not even have a means of self-defense. With his physique and strength, even if a few of them were tied together, they wouldn't be able to withstand a single pinch. Having an electric baton would at least be safer. If he encountered any trouble, he could just poke him with the electric baton. I don't believe that you guys aren't afraid of electricity. Hopefully, this electric baton would be as effective as what the boss said. He definitely wouldn't dare to poke himself as he was afraid of pain. Tong Jia, that silly fellow, looked like he had thick skin and flesh. Let's go back and try poking him. If it didn't work, he would come back and settle the score with the boss. Lastly, there was the camera. Renbachian really wanted to take pictures of the things in this world, such as Tian Tian and Gun Gun. If he were to go back and post them on the internet, it would definitely be very popular. After all, while those scientists were still guessing whether there were extraterrestrial life forms, he had already arrived in a world that was different from Earth. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell anyone about this. He remembered someone saying that not returning home after becoming rich was like walking at night in brocade clothes. Now, it wasn't just a matter of being rich anymore. He was the only one in the entire world. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell anyone about this. He didn't even dare to tell an anonymous story on the internet. He could only use this method to share his feelings of wanting to show off with others. After charging the electric baton, Renbachian put the electric baton and the e-book in a pocket and returned to that world while asleep. After waking up, Renbachian took out the camera from the bag and went out. Sure enough, he saw Yuan Yuan and Gun Gun lying on their backs. Before he raised these 2 little chaps, Renbachian had always thought that animals slept on their backs. In the end, after raising them, he realized that these 2 chaps didn't have any sleeping postures and didn't forget to act cute while sleeping. Well, he took 2 close-up shots and then zoomed out to take pictures from all angles. The 2 little chaps then shook their heads and crawled over to hug his calves while humming non-stop. From top to bottom, Renbachian took a few more pictures of the panda hugging his thighs before hanging the camera around his neck. He teased the 2 chaps for a while before going to fetch them water and prepare breakfast. After eating breakfast, Renbachian put the electric baton on his waist and strolled to look for Tong Jia. Tong Jia was leaning against the wall and picking his teeth with his fingers. He had a signature silly smile on his face. Renbachian didn't know why he was so happy every day. Tong Jia! Renbachian shouted. Hey, caretaker Ren. Tong Jia jogged all the way over and didn't forget to shake his fingers. Renbachian saw a small black dot being flung to the ground by him. Tong Jia, I have something to discuss with you. Caretaker Ren, just say it. Tong Jia said repeatedly. Caretaker Ren was very generous and rewarded him with 1 tael of silver for a day's work. Tong Jia wasn't smart, but he wasn't stupid either. Of course, he knew that Caretaker Ren was powerful and that he had to hug him tightly. I'll poke you with this as a test. Is it okay? Ren Baqian took out the electric baton that looked like a flashlight from his waist and smiled kindly. What's this? It's okay. Caretaker Ren, you can poke me. Tong Jia looked at the gadget in Ren Baqian's hand. It looked like a stick and didn't even have a sharp point. How powerful could it be? He immediately said generously, "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."